Hello, everybody. Today is Wednesday, March 21st, and we bring you episode 89 of Block Digest at block height 514,553. JW is going to be running a little late today, but we got Mr. Rick, the meme master.
Hey, everybody. Hope everybody's enjoying their second day of spring here.
Janine, who's going to dive through in depth quite a few things I haven't had the time to look at yet.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of just the classic story, the paranoid survive because because it ends up being true. Bitcoin is a target of the NSA. No one is surprised. No one is surprised about the Facebook stuff either, guys. No one.
And Mr. Aknix.
Oh, come on. I was shocked. I was absolutely shocked and appalled as well.
All right. Well, I guess let's just dive into the first one. Want to take her away, Rick?
Yeah, man, this was something that I think I was pretty shocked to see, actually, was this executive order coming out of the White House on Monday talking about the Petro. And yeah, if we just go over it there, like, it says, we'll just go read it a little bit. It says, by the authority vested in me as president, by the Constitution and the law of the United States of America, including the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, the National Emergencies Act, and Section 303 of Title III United States Code, I, Donald J. Trump, President of the United States of America, in order to take additional steps with respect to the national emergency declared in Executive Order 13692 on March 8th, 2015, and relied upon for additional steps taken in I don't think Trump said this exactly like this, but this is an executive order coming out of his administration where they're expanding upon Obama's executive order that he issued in 2015, whenever Venezuela really started to look like it was going in its own direction with, trying to get these alliances with oil-rich nations and nations kind of in opposition to the West. And since that has happened, the sanctions have been effective. But now that Nicholas has launched this Petro, it has definitely sort of given this enemy of the state of the United States an ability to fundraise. And it's something where I think this is just like Trump being, Trump, strongman president, putting into action something where your enemies can't fundraise. And by doing, like, there's only real way to regulate crypto here is just to say that U.S. investors can't really get involved, which is all kind of covered here under this Section 5. It says, for the person whose property and interests in property are affected by this order who might have a constitutional presence in the United States, I find that because of the ability to transfer funds or other assets instantaneously, prior notice to such persons or of measures taken pursuant to this order would render those measures ineffectual. I therefore determine that these measures to be effective in addressing national emergency, going back to the original executive order, saying like this is just a way to try and keep those sanctions in place because, yeah, I mean, with the world of crypto now and fundraising with tokens, you have third world nations that are able to seek out funds from the United States, and people could contribute directly. And it's something that hasn't been there in the past. And it's something where, I don't know, seeing this sort of direct approach into the regulations, I think that's an interesting way to approach it because it's very direct and pinpoint. It's not really going after this big thing as what is ICOs or anything. It's just like, this is something you shouldn't support. And if you support it, then you're going to end up in trouble. But that's the way I interpreted it. And it's, like I was saying, it's pretty shocking news, I thought, coming out of the White House for this executive order. What do you guys think?
I don't even think it's necessarily an issue of like, hey, like Venezuela is an enemy of the United States. It's no, they are historically bad with money. They have historically screwed over their citizens over and over and over again. And I think this is a protective measure to prevent people from getting suckered into that now that it's kind of entered the global stage, right?
The Petro is very bad. Okay, very bad. It's the worst. It's horrible. If you buy anything, you're gonna be in big trouble. But that thing, Monero, don't use that thing. Okay, that's even worse. You know, don't use that thing. Don't buy any of this stuff. It's all horrible.
Well, I mean, it doesn't go into anything about technical aspects of like, you know, investments and anything like that. It really is just like, this is something where Nicholas Mark, I don't want to terrify his last name, but the leader there of Venezuela has been able to fundraise, you know, and skirt sanctions. And this is, you know, the regulation in that response to that. I mean, if you know, skipping U.S. sanctions is a problem, you know, that's something where we've handled that, you know, with a firm hand, and it's been easy to handle. But now it's like it requires some pretty detailed language, because just anybody could now, you know, help fundraise that state. So it's something where, yeah, I don't think we'll see much technical language out of the executive branch there. We'll probably see much more of that coming from the CFTC and the SEC and everything. But I don't know, this felt like to me just like it needed to be addressed. I mean, you have U.S. sanctions against the state, and now they're fundraising. So how are you going to do that? How are you going to address it? And looks like the best thing they can do in the world of crypto is stopping the citizenry from investing in that and helping fundraise for that state.
I think this is, I don't know, the way this could play out, I think, is going to be very interesting. And I think this is really going to be potentially, depending on how they go about trying to enforce this, a huge wake-up call for users regarding their privacy. Because, I mean, this, like, if they actually do really devote resources to trying to enforce this, like, their only real option is chain analytics. Like, yeah, you can see some Bitcoin went to an address to buy some of this, but who? And, like, you know, I think, like, that can go south in a number of different ways. Like, you know, obviously, first off, if you just do this, your coins are tied to you and you get caught, like, you're going to get in some big shit. But, like, on the other side of that, like, you know, chain analytics isn't perfect. Like, it's just applying, like, heuristics to things, plugging in data on top of that, and hoping that the margin of error isn't, like, too great. So, I mean, like, you know, I see a potential for something like, you know, somebody goes off and buys the Petro with their Bitcoin, but they've been careful in limiting, like, their personal exposure as far as data connected to coins on chain, and somebody previously in that link is tied to it. And then you have somebody who's like, those coins have left their control, but they're getting pegged by chain analytics data as the person who purchased the Petro. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
this.
That sounds like a nightmare for some person, just like randomly transacting in Bitcoin in the United States. And if they get caught up in that, that would be a litigation nightmare. It could be kind of hard to prove that you didn't send that. But this is just like, yeah, we'll see how it plays out. It's something where I'm thinking just the executive order itself is going to discourage a lot of people from even thinking about doing that. But, you know, it is one of those things where people, you know, don't agree with the White House. They don't like Trump, and we don't know how far they're willing to go with all that. And so, you know, I'm sure there's definitely going to be people still trying to, you know, push that, you know, boundary. And, you know, I'm sure that some innocents might get caught up in the regulation of that. So it's going to be, yeah, it's going to be pretty hairy trying to decipher which is which. But I don't know. I think for the most part, we shouldn't see much investment coming out of the United States towards that. Petro, I mean, I think now we'll stop. Well, you know, it's starting to look pretty weird. I mean, like, just I think the news was breaking that Russia's starting to endorse the Petro. So it's like the geopolitics of it all is starting to play in. And, you know, in the US, I mean, like, we're free and independent and all, but we do have that presence of mind that we're under the power of the state. And I mean, like, if you started doing something like that, then, you know, you would have to be pretty naive to just think that that sort of thing would go unnoticed. So it's just a sign of the times. It's like, it's interesting to see because, yeah, the geopolitics of all of this is playing into crypto, and, you know, the real regulations are coming in where it's like, you know, it's got to do with nation states and what their plans are with this tech. So it was an interesting story. It was something that I thought was, you know, shocking to see somebody from the White House say something about it, even though I don't think Donald Trump said a word from that executive order, because like I was wording it early. I know Trump can't say stuff like that. I can barely say like word stuff like that. It's all legalese and everything.
But it's, you know, I'm surprised that there's not memes all over the place of like Trump like ban blockchain.
I know. I was surprised not to hear anything else out of it. I mean, like, I think we're like really the first like people talk about it. I thought I would see something about it on the morning briefs, but I didn't catch it. But I don't know. Then again, you know, there's a lot of stuff going on, but you think of something out of Trump's mouth, the media picks it up and runs with it, but nobody wants to say something. I don't know. I jumped at the opportunity to throw Trump on the artwork. So yeah, this is, I don't know. I think it's very relevant for anybody in crypto. It's something that people should be talking more about and memeing more.
He's a beautiful guy. You know, he's fucking gorgeous.
It's beautiful for those memes, for sure.
But yeah, it's just, you know,
Grab him by the Petro.
Sorry.
Grab him by the Petros. Yeah.
But yeah, I guess anybody got else or anything else to say on this one?
Nope, I'm just gonna hide out in my Merkle tree here.
I saw you change your background there. I was like, what is that? I couldn't tell because I was doing this report. Okay, it's a Merkle tree. I like it. It's kind of going with that fashion trend too, where everybody's like, I don't know, what is it, Obama or somebody, like there's like some painting of Obama behind some wall, and now everybody's like doing the Homer Simpson into the ivy thing. I don't, it's I like it though. It's a Merkle tree. It makes more sense.
Yeah, that's pretty sweet.
All right. Well, next two up are some pretty dense thingies from Congress and so forth. So forgive the rambling, but here we go. The G20 letter actually only, or hey, JW, pretty much only had a small section on crypto assets. And really the biggest gist of like as far as the reason why they decided there's no real need to try to push a cohesive international regulatory framework is kind of really silly in my opinion. It's mostly just over the market capitalization at this point, which they're kind of pointing out is less than 1% of the global GDP. And they kind of point to the value of credit swaps around the time of the financial crisis in 2008. It pretty much being equal to the world GDP. And frankly, I think that is like, it's a really silly line of reasoning because like its current market cap, like that can change at the snap of a finger. I mean, all the variables that go into that, the amount of, you know, aggregate demand as far as fiat on the buy side, the supply up for sale on exchanges, like all of these things can change very rapidly. And the fact that just because it's small now, like it does not present some kind of systemic, you know, implications for the world economy at large. I think like this reads to me more like they're just kind of trying to dismiss it as like a PR move. Like, you know, this is insignificant. It's tiny. Like we should just ignore it. But, you know, when you really look at like over the past year, just the increasing involvement of major financial institutions, like, you know, the fact that Venezuela is pushing their own cryptocurrency, like the way Japan and South Korea is really integrating things. Like, I think it's really foolhardy the way they've kind of just dismissed it as not needing attention right now. And I mean, you know, I'm very happy that they're kind of taking this attitude and leaving things alone for the time being. But, you know, I have to point out stupid when I see stupid. Like these guys, I still don't think really appreciate what is coming and what's about to hit them.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that at all. The only other thought that I have is that maybe they do know that this is a big deal. It kind of seems more likely that they know that this is a big deal, but they're invested in it, right? They're on board, and they want to see their investment soar. They couldn't get in early on the dollar scam. It's run its course. That pre-mine is over. All the suckers have already been sucked dry, and they're willing to move on to something else, even if it's something that's going to pay them in the short term and not pay them in the long term.
Yeah, I thought it was I don't know. I thought it was funny just to see that sort of back and forth there within the G20. It was the FSB that sent that letter, and it's funny because the market makes its moves and people reach for news stories to explain it, and everybody was saying, what was the letter? This letter said that they were thinking about regulating cryptos, and that's what did it. And then of course the G20 was saying they kind of rejected that idea, and so then the market rebounded. That was what they were reaching for as far as why the market rebounded. But I think all that's still just on technicals, and they're just grabbing for stories to explain it. But I think it's like we're saying, I think it's funny just to see them sort of debate it internally as far as look, it's a problem, and other people saying no, it's not a problem. And I mean, maybe they're naive enough to not think it's a problem, but I think this just the political whims are changing. I mean, it's just things are moving, and those old infrastructures that have kept these USD pre-mine and everything in place is it's withering away. And there's new consensus mechanisms forming around it that are definitely forming a threat. And I don't know, I think there's definitely people in there that, hey, they want to see it go down just as much as everybody else, and they think they can control it along the way. So it's just everything sort of playing out. It was an interesting couple of days.
Mm-hmm. And it's most of their concerns that they actually voiced in this letter were mostly just the standard nonsense, consumer and investor protection and the ability to launder money and finance terrorism. But I mean, it's this I kind of want to agree with JW. It's this whole thing has kind of played out regarding the G20 exactly like I thought it would. There was a month or so of this big FUD, one government after another stepping up and demanding out of the G20 coherent international response to things. And then that kept building right up until we're almost to the actual meeting, and then we're not going to do anything. This doesn't present a risk, and then the price spiked. I mean, it just, I know you can't really pinpoint any specific causal factors for why the market does what it does. But I mean, just when you look at the chart going back to the later part of last year, it's that run up to 20K was ridiculous. It was completely irrational exuberance. And it coincided almost exactly with futures markets coming online. And then the huge crash down, the news of the GOX agent liquidating things on the market, all of this building FUD for regulations. And then whoosh, we see a series of self-regulatory organizations pop up. The G20 announces they're not going to be taking any kind of coordinated international action. And now the price is starting to, at least it looks try to rebound and start moving upwards again. And just the entire situation to me, when I step back, it just looks like a completely coordinated thing. Artificially push the price up because you can now hedge on actual legacy markets. And then you're making money the whole way down. So like as long as you can actually get more exposure in those futures markets than you actually spent pushing up the spot price, I mean, you can make out like a bandit and then accumulate the whole way down while also profiting on the move. Like, I mean, it just like, you know, I can't really see any other kind of narrative form in my head when I look at all of this.
Oh yeah, I mean the setup play just seems pretty obvious as far as like you know, like you're saying, the exuberance from that run up from, you know, up to 20K. Like it's like as soon as we passed 5, it's like you blink a couple of times and we were there. And yeah, I mean it makes sense because like you could say, you got all these legacy markets there to where you can, you know, those guys, they know how to move this money around. Like I'm not coming from these legacy markets, but they know all about shorting and margins and getting, you know, their numbers to where they get them where they want them. And you know, I'm sure they definitely made out like a bandit on this whole price rise and the crash back down. I'm sure there's definitely some people there that, you know, like we're saying, that Gox trustee and all that information. It's like there's some people making some big figures in the background while all this stuff is going on.
Yeah, and I mean, you know, like when you like think back to like when Jamie Dimon really started going nuts with the FUD. I mean, like one of the most common things in like markets you'll see when people are trying to push things is they'll throw price points out. And I mean, like a lot of Bitcoiners even will do this. And like even Jamie Dimon like kind of latched on to that 100K figure and just started like anchoring that in people's minds. And then, I mean, once you really have that, like that's the frame of reference you're going off of. And hey, 10K, 20K is just further, like we're just walking towards 100K, and then bam, like you get slammed. And I mean, like G Willikers in the chat box is kind of telling me there's no conspiracy here. It's just crowd mentality. But like, that's kind of the point I'm trying to make, G Willikers, is like the crowd is what really sets the price at the end of the day. But crowds can be led around, like they can be manipulated. And when you are a person in that like asymmetrical place where everybody hears you, and like, you know what I mean? Like you're in a position to really influence the mentality of that crowd.
Yeah. What exactly do you guys think people want to be in those positions for? Like, do you think people really want to be like a congressman because they're patriotic? Is that what I'm dealing with here? Is there that level of naivete that is like these people, even though they had to do all of the deals and build all the relationships over decades in order to get in a position to do favors to people who had to do them favors and to get them into those positions of power, they have somehow no interest in using their position for personal gain? Like they are really just that much of a Jesus figure?
Do you think that somebody would go through all that trouble of like forming those relationships and getting all that stuff? I mean, like there's got to be at least like, there's definitely people that have entered the system with like a motive that's not of, I'm going to reward the people, I'm going to pick the winner. I think there's people that are fighting to do, like, you know, they're not all
if there was any other competition, wait a minute, if there was any other competition where at the end you got a big check and you saw a bunch of people fighting to participate in this competition, you would be an absolute lunatic to think that the big check didn't have a part of the motivation. But somehow, after decades of public schooling, we look at this and go, no, that's just an odd consequence. The fact that somebody in South Korea can make an announcement and buy or sell and profit from that knowledge right beforehand, that's just a coincidence. Like that's clearly not their motivation. I mean, they're definitely there just to help the little guy. It's absolute lunacy to me, but I get it. I mean, we've been bathed in it for a long time. And for us that are not self-centered, it's kind of hard to imagine that people would be that jaded. But in every other, I mean, Jamie Dimon, he's not even a government official, right? Do you really think that he's the head of Chase Bank to take care of the little guy? Come on. I mean, we don't even have propaganda that's trying to convince us of that.
Well, like I'm just
I mean,
like,
in Rick's defense, though, I mean, like there are people in the system who do get in there for the right reasons, but normally
Ron Paul.
they're they're the minority.
well, that's where I'm thinking, like, you know, I just don't want to, I don't know. I mean, like, I don't know exactly how we jumped to this, like, part of the conversation and discussion, but, like, I mean, I definitely think, like, you know, yeah, there's a lot of people that enter into that thinking, like, they're going to pick the winner and they're going to make the best out of it for themselves, and that's it. But, I mean, like, I think that's, I don't know. I think that's like the minority that enter in like that. I think maybe some become jaded along the way and like realize like, oh shit, like there's like this or that, and then like they feel like they have to play the game, and on the other side of it, they're playing the same game. Where I don't know. I think it's very nuanced. It's not like everybody's coming from this position or that position. I think a lot of people to even attempt to try and take on that game have to have at least some intention of wanting to help some other people.
Yeah,
Well,
I won't try to.
thing,
I won't try to fight the government battle, but I'll just focus on the banking battle. If you think that somebody is the head of a big bank because they wanted to take care of the little guy, I don't know, man. You've got a lot more generosity in your heart than I do.
Well, yeah, I don't know. The big bank guys, I mean, you know, I don't really see that as much as like, you know, you're entering into some service towards others agreement. I mean, like, I think pretty much at that level, you are entering in for strictly, I mean, that's the whole reason for that is like all about profiteering and able to make more money. And that's what that whole infrastructure is. So, yeah, I don't know. I don't equate the two.
Want to hop into the fray, Janine?
Well, I just wanted to specifically share something that I saw today about money laundering. The accusation of money laundering for cryptocurrencies is pretty bogus, specifically because it addresses how the real estate market in the UK is pretty atrocious. And the reason is because a large percentage of the real estate market in London specifically is a money laundering mechanism. But he also, in addition to that, he points out that, like, even if, like, I think I don't know what study he linked to. There was one that we've talked about before on Block Digest that showed that less than 1% of transactions were linked to any kind of illicit activity. So that's not even money laundering. That's anything considered illicit, which is not the same as illegal. So it's a very small percentage. And if you think about how small the overall cryptocurrency market is, that's also a very small percentage, like still somewhere around $300 billion. Well, this is actually from that was a quote. I don't know, when was this blog post written? I think it was recently, but I'm not sure. I think the market is still somewhere around 300 billion total. But yeah, it's like he makes the point that the cryptocurrency market is still so small and there's barely any evidence of it being mostly used for illicit activity that it's not even worth the resources to go after it. There was a pretty funny statistic specifically about real estate in London, where he said that around half of the 766 companies alleged to have been involved in high-end money laundering were based at just 8 UK addresses. And that was from a research report by Transparency International, which found that I think, let me see. So they were involved in 52 large-scale corruption and money laundering cases approaching valuations of $80 billion. So London in itself is like a huge concentration of that kind of activity. Now, that's not a discussion about, you know, because the government's brush as to what they consider money laundering is pretty wide. But the idea that cryptocurrencies are special or that it's a widespread problem is not really the case. It's basically just something that a lot of the banking executives are using as a smear tactic. So the fact that it was mentioned at the G20 meeting, like, I don't know, I didn't see them cite any nuanced counter arguments against that claim. So they should really be doing that because, I mean, it's like saying there's like a money laundering operation with trading cards, like game trading cards. Like I'm sure.
Right.
I mean, you know, there was, you know, Magic the Gathering online exchange ended up becoming Mt. Gox. I guess that was a good example. But now Shinobi wants to rant. Okay.
Oh my god. You know, and the funny thing is, Janine, is that is a completely not unreasonable thing to make, because trading card games, like especially Magic, have huge secondary markets. Like,
yes,
like complete tangent.
No.
It's not related to cryptocurrencies, but everybody watching now, Google Alpha Investments on YouTube and watch this guy's channel. He runs a Magic the Gathering business, and like he literally just shoves in people's face how manipulated like the price of certain cards are, like how ridiculously incompetent Wizards of the Coast is as far as like guarding information about card supplies, which people can use to their advantage, like as far as buying and reselling things. It's like Magic the Gathering is like crypto before there was crypto as far as the market aspect.
Yeah, my point is that no one is going to like hold an international meeting of diplomats from like different countries and be discussing like whether they should ban trading cards. Like that's never the whole point of this, is that cryptocurrencies are a threat to the assumed right of the state to control money. Trading cards, I don't know if they do that much. But no one is like saying we should ban trading cards because there's a money laundering operation going on.
But Janine, how else are we going to stop the fruit running on the New York Magic Exchange?
Totally, the drug dealers, they're using the kids' cards. They're playing Dungeons and Dragons and moving cocaine by the truckload.
Yeah, selling a lot of those rare cards along the way. Those Magic the Gathering cards in that Alpha Investments channel is comical to watch. I'd also suggest someone watch that. How blatant it is. It's funny, and I don't know. It's just making me think about these CryptoKitties. My goodness, you know, they got $12 million. Like, I don't know where it's like. I'm taking this on a tangent with that one, but it's like I saw that. I was like, man, these guys are crazy. Like, people are just whatever. But yeah, that's the markets.
It's a sneak peek, but yeah, when we get to that one, I'm gonna tear everybody involved in that a new asshole. But I guess
speaking,
any last thoughts on this before I jump to the next big official report?
Well, I think, you know, someone in the chat box has already asked about it, or I think they did, or maybe I saw it on Twitter. But are we going to address the other activity on the blockchain that is actually super rare, which is apparently that journalists found one instance of child porn out of a few thousand images?
You know, actually, yeah, we should probably touch on that. I forgot to add that on the news desk.
So the funniest tweet that I saw, this one guy was saying that there is child porn in every Bitcoin.
Yeah, if you downloaded the blockchain, you know.
And he was not kidding. He was not kidding either, and it was so hilarious.
That totally reminds me of the babies in the Pepsi. There's babies in every Pepsi to make them taste good. You would think that that's insane, but that was my introduction to Alex Jones. That was the first article I ever read from what is it? Cyber Wars or whatever. What is it?
Info Wars. It's info. You don't know we're in an info war? Come on, GW. We're in an info war.
Oh, Janine, did you find the link to? Oh no, I thought you found the link to that old article of babies in the Pepsi. I was excited.
No,
you can get your silver iodine.
Excited.
All right. Come on. It's the topic. We got a topic.
Wasn't this talked about like a long time ago, though? Really?
Yeah, it's very old. That's why it's not news.
Exactly.
Like I've literally been waiting for this to become a big FUD piece for years. Like, it's pretty much like back in like 2013 or around then, like somebody actually embedded an image of child pornography and some links to other things in the blockchain. And like, really, it's like, in order to access that, like, you would need to intentionally grab software to compile random snippets of hex code, like order that correctly, and actually resolve that into an image. And without doing that, it is literally just like random pieces of data scattered around, chopped up in different transactions. And I mean, it's not like there's a button you can click on Bitcoin Core and watch the kitty porn. Like, you would actually have to take a lot of complicated steps to take those little pieces of data and actually reconstruct like an image out of that. And I mean, like, ultimately, like, this is exactly why I think that was put there in the first place, because some fucking piece of shit out there, whether they actually are a fucking like scummy piece of shit who gets off on things like that, or just somebody with access to it, put it there specifically to drum up this FUD, to like, ooh, the Bitcoin blockchain is a place to store child pornography. And I mean, like, this is part of the reason why, or at least one of the reasons why, a limitation to the block size limit is important. Why you need to actually have that scarcity of that space that costs real money. Because if it's not, if you just subsidize it infinitely, well, then people are just going to treat it like free storage. And I mean, as far as something redundant like a blockchain, most of the uses for that are not going to be legitimate uses. They're going to be sick, fucked up things like people spamming kitty porn into a blockchain. And I mean, like, this is, you know, like this is one of the reasons why you need a fee market, to disincentivize things like this, to make things like this not cost effective. Because if you don't, then eventually some sicko out there is going to use it for things like this.
Yeah, I mean, like you're saying with the fees, I was kind of, when I read this and was thinking about, like, didn't mention that somebody, like, I think maybe it was Luke, that put in some Bible verses into the chain, where it's just like, you know, that at the time might have been pretty cheap, but now I'm thinking it might have been, you know, looking back, it might have been expensive to do that. And, you know, it's something where in the future you can't really do that with the value of like Bitcoin going up like it is. It would definitely discourage that sort of thing. And like just the interpretation of like the data is available for you because it's on the blockchain. You own this piece of pornography, like just like that is a breakdown of just like data interpretation. And like, I don't know, that just like is not true. I mean, like the data, like you're saying, it's chunked up and it's broken down. And I mean, you know, it's not exactly just accessible and all that. I mean, like you can't go to a button and say like, take me to the porn block. It just doesn't work. So I think, yeah, it's something that, you know, we'll see, you know, like the fee market and the price, all that sort of stuff is discouraging that sort of stuff. And, you know, it's just all part of the evolution.
And also, if we get into the game of like shutting down every website or network or anything that has ever might have touched child porn, it's like you're basically shutting down the entire internet. Like, sorry, there is some wacko out there who has or a bunch of wackos who have visited a lot of websites, probably the same websites and like social media sites that you use. They probably use it as part of their business. So do you want all of them shut down too? Like, and it doesn't, like some people are saying we should, like some people who don't understand how Bitcoin works are like, why don't they just like roll back the chain and remove the transaction? It's like, are you kidding me? And then other people are, I mean, it was coming from a good place, but some people were mistakenly saying that Bitcoin is encrypted. Therefore, how do you even see the images? No, Bitcoin is not encrypted. Also, well, we'll get into that later about fake Satoshi not knowing what cryptography is, but yeah.
And I mean, like, honestly, like, if you are really paranoid about this, you're scared the government's gonna come get you and accuse you of possessing child porn because of this, just run a prune node. Like, it'll just bootstrap things, download things to verify, and it'll cut all the crap out. And I mean, you know what I mean? If that is something that really freaks you out, just do that.
And if you don't think this kind of thing can happen in Ethereum, you're you're in for a whirlwind of fun in the next few years.
Yeah, and jeez, yeah, Vitalik, I think he even got caught up in a conversation discussing this topic, and it wasn't very. I don't know. I think it was in the light of like these people should be taken, child pornographers or whatever. Let's not dig too into that.
Possessing child porn is no different than doing heroin.
Yeah, wow.
Oh, yeah, that's what it was. Oh, man. Vitalik. Yeah. So, I mean, while, like, let's say that information is in the chain, I mean, like, I think it is, like, a testament to the fact that, like, it's the idea of, like, suppressing information is really hard. And, like, at least while it's there, it's, like, highly contentious. Like, we're talking about it. It's like, yeah, it's not something that, anybody's digging through trying to find and decode, and like that's the purpose of this thing. Where you got CryptoKitties and you got all these things that are technically encrypted, immutable, whatever. So I don't know. And yeah, if that sort of thing happened on Ethereum, it'd be a nightmare because you got Vitalik at the head, who no worse than heroin, supposedly.
Well, you just roll the chain back, like it just, they've set the precedent with the DAO, with the, just roll it back. It'll be fine. It'll be great.
Yeah, I forgot. That's like the Opus Miranda over there. Just roll it back. It's all good.
But I mean, it's like at the end of the day, I mean, like there's a reason that this was put there to do exactly this, to play to the think of the kids argument and try to use that as a wedge to undermine Bitcoin's immutability. Because, hey, we need to take that out of here. And as much as I wish that was possible, like you can't do that without destroying the integrity of the record of the blockchain. Like every piece of data deterministically condenses to the chain of hashes, and you cannot tweak a single bit of that and still be able to actually cryptographically verify everything.
Yeah, it's one of those things where somebody must have been, had the foresight, or like they're planning of like, later I'll be able to use this as a mode of attack. And it's like we're saying, it's an old piece of information. It's one of those things that just sort of, I guess, is going to continually keep popping back up over time to sort of just, like the China banned Bitcoin or whatever, keeps popping up. It'll be one of those things that we'll just have to be aware it's going to come back up eventually.
And Jeannie wants to take over commentary for a second. Here's that stupid tweet she was talking about.
Yeah, so this is like a thread for people who do not know what Bitcoin is or how it works. The replies are pretty hilarious. I don't think any of them beat, obviously, the top tweet. But yeah, they're like, some of the comments are just trying to figure out what a Bitcoin is. Like most people don't even know that Bitcoin, like an actual Bitcoin, it's a value. It's, or what's the correct word? It's like a fraction of a value that is based on the history of proof of work. Like it's not a Bitcoin is not an actual thing, that it's like not an object.
I can't quantify it then.
Yeah. And so there's not anything that is stored in an actual Bitcoin. That doesn't make sense. There's transaction data. There's not stuff stored in the Bitcoin. Yeah.
Ah, man. Fucking dum-dums.
This is one of the reasons I don't engage on Twitter. Be engaging all day.
But I guess be ready for the next big Shinobi rant about big reports.
Yeah,
oh, right.
Go for it.
Excuse the pop can opening. All right. So this report from Congress, the section on cryptos, pretty much about 20 pages long. And I have to say, I was very surprised during the first part of it. And then they went and did something stupid again. So pretty much the first section is pretty much just a breakdown of kind of the recent history of crypto markets. And they're even starting to look at things like Google Trend Analytics now and trying to correlate that with things. And funny thing I thought was hilarious here, if you look at the giant parabolic line that is Bitcoin, these little blips below it are Ethereum and blockchain searches. So even for the relative size of Ethereum, as far as people trying to find information on it, it's not even a candle to Bitcoin. And, just kind of a rundown of the price history, comparing it to the 90s .com bubble. And then they actually go over some analysis of kind of the potential for how these kinds of assets are going to evolve over time. And this is the part where I really thought, like, this is a pretty on point analysis of things, where they're pretty much just discussing like the fact that it's a speculative asset right now, and mostly used for the purposes of speculation, but has kind of the potential to just organically evolve into something like a money. And they even point to the instability in exchange rates as like the one barrier for that, and how just the price stabilizing against fiat currencies, seeing as fiat is what's functioning as the unit of account, would actually make it a little more smooth for transactional purposes. And they even go into arguing that in the event of that happening, we could see Bitcoin itself become a unit of account instead of simply using fiat and translating over into Bitcoin. And it's like really a pretty honest and on point assessment of like where these things could go in the long term. Like you start off speculatively, you build up that value and become a more stable place to store it, and then that kind of snowballs as long as the technological gaps are filled in to actually allow transactional use at volume. And then that slowly slides into, well, now we can actually keep account of things in this. But sadly, after this part, and I want to note real quick, they referred to miners as validators. And yeah, people need to stop doing that and need to appreciate the fact that they proposed the thing and everybody. But then they go on into full retard and start talking about, my medical data on the blockchain and how we can blockchain all the things. And blockchains are a redundant storage medium for any type of data. And it's like, it kind of kills me inside, because it's like, if you actually go through and read this section of the report, like, it is a very coherent, accurate breakdown of where Bitcoin is in the economy now and where it can kind of grow to fill in more roles and niches in the future. And then when they get past that into the technology, it's just full retard. Like, trying to find this section now, they're pretty much talking as far as the medical records, the idea of a blockchain being able to pretty much allow users to keep their medical records directly with them on a smartphone and be able to control access permissions to things. And like, this whole notion is ridiculous. Like, if you have your medical records on your phone, why do they need to be on a blockchain redundantly kept everywhere? Like, where does a blockchain fit into this instead of just cryptography? Like, right. You give users the software to manage and encrypt their records locally. You can even have, to be a little semantic twisting here, you can even have your own, air quote, local blockchain embedded in their records to show like when they've been updated, who's updated them, and just keep those localized records that nobody else needs to care about except people interacting with your records. And then there you go. Like you have your records, they're encrypted. There is an audit history of what doctors and professionals are actually using it, updating it, making changes to it. And you don't need a blockchain for that. But like the one part that like makes this whole idea crumble in my mind, even if you strip away the blockchain buzzword nonsense, is, well, okay, what about key management? Because the security of these kinds of systems are only as good as, how secure you keep your key. And like, do we really think that every person out there is going to be able to secure encryption keys for their medical records when you have all of that data spread around on their personal devices? I mean, the idea that that's a smart thing to do is just ridiculous in my mind.
Yeah. I mean, if I wanted to have my medical records on any electronic device, I would want it to be a specific isolated device that was for that purpose. Like, first of all, this is assuming that people are going to use this is for people that use smartphones for daily activities and a lot of things. I am not one of those people. So like, I don't store anything sensitive on a smartphone, and I definitely wouldn't have my medical records on a smartphone. So if I ever put my medical records on any device that I carried around with me at any time, it would be an isolated device that was specifically for that purpose, that was offline.
Well, are medical records an actual pretty big problem? I mean, I find that most citizens probably have no clue what's on their actual medical record. Most people in the United States, they've never held it. They don't know what's on there. They don't have a clue. That is one of the probably potentially biggest attack vectors to really screw with someone's life. And I don't think that these companies have the proper incentives to keep that data intact. I really don't think they have any reason to be very accurate there and to even transport that data accordingly. I know, just going out to a different hospital before, the other hospital was calling, trying to get the medical records from them, and I guess some kind of negotiation happens in the back end. Who's the who lends the authenticity to these medical records? It's a huge mess from what I understand. So I mean, a solution is needed, but yeah, blockchain, I don't know.
Yeah, because I mean, everybody has to remember that in most countries, even very developed countries like the US and the UK, most hospitals are using outdated versions of Windows. Do you really want your phone to be even if your phone was the most secure device ever, and that's where you stored your medical records, once you actually have to share it with them, it's still going to end up on some kind of Windows device, and it's not even worth it.
Yeah, I mean, this report, like you were saying earlier, it's nice to see, they are understanding this stuff, but it is kind of this meme of medical records on the blockchain just keeps popping up, and it's something where, AK saying, I mean, it is something where, we really do need to have some sort of information, solidity to that information. I'll just say, because, I've been through the VA system for a decade now, and that whole system is required upon, verifiable proof of medical histories and incidents and the way that all came about. And, recently moving to Colorado, it was I had to move my medical record, the VA, even though I still was in the VA, it's I had to move my medical records. And then whenever I finally did sort of get into the system up here, it was they didn't really have access to any of my old records. It's they were starting from scratch, and I had to provide. It is a nightmare. I don't understand how they're doing it right now in any sort of way to where it's got any continuity to it. And it's one of those things where I really think just strong encryption and a better idea of how we should handle these systems. I think we're saying, I mean, it doesn't really require a blockchain as much as it just requires strong encryption and and good access to that encryption for whoever those records belong to. Because it's definitely an issue, but it's something where, like we're saying, I don't think blockchain's the answer. I think there's just some better needs of understanding technology and the way that it works with us.
I think they've been in that position of just like robbing people blind for so long. They kind of didn't even bother putting that together because they're like, we'll get busted sooner or later and we'll have to quit, and they'll make us like, regulate this and come up with strict guidelines for transparency and sharing of like, medical records. But no one's ever cracked that nut.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, aside from like the whole medical record thing, I mean, like this middle one, I can see some potential for a use of some kind of blockchain based system to kind of scale out energy grids. But I mean, the only really reason that you would need a blockchain specifically is just to kind of cement the ordering of things, because you're dealing with economic activity. And I mean, at the end of the day, we have something like open timestamps, which pretty much allows like committing to a practically infinite amount of information in a single transaction in a block. So when I look at like things like this, I mean, I see how like a blockchain could actually enable some use here, but I also don't see why people are like building independent systems instead of just kind of piggybacking on Bitcoin, because all you really need is like that canonical ordering of things to have a sort of finality. And I mean, like the same thing applies to they're discussing using kind of blockchain systems for like logistical tracking through distribution networks. And I mean, it's like there's just like this weird situation where people won't acknowledge that like either we don't need a blockchain, we just need to actually take cryptography, which has been around for years, and actually apply it, or there's a way to actually like link these kind of systems into Bitcoin, which is right now the most secure system out there. And like it's I can't see any other reason to like not recognize that except for financial reasons. Like people see the ability to profit in building an independent system instead of just doing the common sense thing. And it's kind of just brushed through a lot of this. Like one of the other things I think was actually kind of on the nose is discussing how like there is still a huge risk for theft, although they do distinguish that like the base protocol of something like Bitcoin is effectively unhackable, but that still leaves the fringes of kind of users actually managing their own private keys. And they kind of call back to like Mt. Gox as a reason when people outsource that to another entity instead of managing it themselves. Like you're pretty much trusting them to get right what you feel you can't get right yourself. And pretty much the last section of it was just a breakdown of future regulatory questions. And I mean, this is pretty much just like going over a lot of the news out of the SEC lately regarding ICOs and how they're going to handle those as securities if you're pretty much releasing a token without an actual product or network built. Obviously, the the question of taxation, and they kind of, I actually didn't know this until I read this report, but apparently when you are exchanging a foreign currency, there's actually a $200 exemption for capital gains, and then you owe gains on anything above that. And this was explicitly denied for cryptocurrencies, even though they're kind of taxed in the same way as like an asset that foreign currencies are. And they bring up the Cryptocurrency Fairness Act that I believe a senator from Colorado and somewhere else are pushing to try to create an exemption for purchases under $600. And then kind of the last section is dealing with the issue of money transmission and like kind of what pretty much what they're doing here is they're like breaking down how this has kind of been left to state regulations for the most part, and cryptocurrencies are kind of making them reconsider leaving like money transmission regulations in the state's hands, and they're kind of thinking about like a more broad federal framework just because of how inconsistent and patchwork things are. Like if for anybody who's been in the space for a long time, Coinbase, when they first got going, it was like a whole rolling process where it was like, oh, this week we finally got our licenses in like states X, Y, and Z. So like you guys can buy Bitcoin now. And it was like a whole dragged out process before they were actually fully licensed in every state in the country to offer business to customers. And like this part has me kind of skeptical because like I could see the potential for somebody trying to push like a more uniform approach to that to kind of reduce frictions to entering the space in the United States. But I also see the potential, like you look at the bit license, like I do not want to see like a federal equivalent of the bit license just mandated for every state in the United States. But I mean, pretty much the TLDR of the report is like they're slowly starting to put things together, but there's still a lot of big gaps of understanding like how all of this actually works and what it's useful for and what it's not.
Yeah, I mean, like we just recently seen the New York license, like those guys come together that put that together say that they need to redo it because it was sort of a one size fits all approach that was the wrong way to go. And like you're saying, this cites that IRS report, which I think is about the same thing that the New York agreement was going off of. I mean, not the New York agreement, the New York license was going off of. And so I don't know. It's just one of those things where early interpretations and lines and regulations started to come up, and people are still kind of going back to that, it looks like. But, luckily there is, guys like the head of the CFTC there that are, educating people. And it seems like that education's going through. It's just like they're still sort of going through the same education process that everybody goes through, and they have to go through this period of trying to understand what a blockchain is and what Bitcoin's trying to achieve and whether or not it has applications for medical records and all sorts of other things that they're thinking about applying it to. And yeah, it's just one of those things that over time, we'll see how it plays out, and hopefully, I think we're going to start seeing more of like a patchwork as far as just like, not a one size fits all approach, but just sort of like this state or this region is kind of supporting this and that is supporting this. And those will start to, give a little bit better guidance towards these people and I guess the House there to, come up with proper laws and regulations for
Well,
them.
yeah, I mean, that's going to give us a larger variety of, potential solutions for us, right? I mean, stuff that could work out, and trying that, having different sets of laws or guidelines or rules is probably going to foster some some interesting cases, and we'll see how incentives play out. That's the big deal, seeing how the incentives actually work, right? Because they don't always work as intended.
And I mean, that's that approach would be a lot better for regulation than a top-down approach, for the same reason that capitalism is always going to be superior to socialism or communism. Like if you want to actually have a robust, workable solution, you have all the different solutions compete. You don't just go, we're only doing this one, and who cares how other things could work out.
Yeah, I think that's where, I don't know, we'll start to see those incentives kind of line up where we'll get different regulations in different areas. And, we'll start to see how, I imagine it will be a case where people will start to move to where regulations are favorable towards them. And I mean, like, I think kind of already seen that a little bit with those Robin Hood traders moving towards the Midwest.
All right. So who's ready to suck up to the king of Twitter, in hopes that we don't get banned in the ongoing Twitter war.
I want my blue star. I want to be verified.
Oh my God, what's going on Twitter?
I believe the official term is blue check, and it's like the first class of Twitter.
It's the blue tick.
I don't think we're eligible to be in Twitter first class.
I deserve to be in the Twitter elite. But yeah, so following the news of his investment in Lightning Labs and recently rolling out Bitcoin support in Square Cash, Jack is making some pretty bold statements of Bitcoin. He's pretty much predicting within 10 years it's going to outrun the dollar and become more significant in the world by pretty much becoming the currency of the internet. And as cheesy as this is, I was kind of thinking before we got on, like a good way to kind of frame, at least I think, like where he's coming from is for anybody who's read the book Ready Player One. Pretty much a huge part of the plot, I guess, is in their like virtual reality internet, the Oasis. It had its own kind of internal currency for use within it, and in the story, it was pretty much like the world reserve currency. It was the Bitcoin to the dollar shitcoin. And we've seen kind of over the last 20 years since the internet's really taken off, people like Paul Krugman saying it would not affect the economy more than the fax machine pretty much had shit thrown in their face as it's gobbled up gigantic parts of the entire world economy. And like the more people keep integrating into the internet and it becomes important in their lives and starts facilitating like actual economic activity, like that having its own native currency, I mean, like I don't think it's going to outright kill the dollar overnight. But I mean, when you have that kind of virtual nation, so to say, and it has its own currency now to actually facilitate economic activity instead of depending on all of the national like controlled systems that exist right now, like I think that's just going to explode. And I mean, like informationally, we're already kind of seeing the internet as like its own territory. Like people will just go online, they will spread information, and that there is no means of controlling that like there is with conventional media. And I think that's exactly what is going to happen with the economy in Bitcoin. Like it's not just going to kill fiat currencies overnight, but when people realize like, hey, I use the internet for XYZ, I'm on the internet constantly, like I'm constantly doing economic things online, and I just have like a native currency right now where I don't have to deal with all the other overhead with exchange rates, with the friction, like that's just gonna fucking explode.
Yeah, man, like honestly, like I hadn't read too much about Ready Player One, but I'll just like I think I'm about to do a spoiler here. But I heard that the story has to do with like a central thing of like fixing a bug, whereas like a bug bounty is like the major thing everybody's playing for. And it's just like, yeah, starting to think about it. It's like, we do have a bug in our system. It's like valid information and financial freedom. That's what we're going for. Bitcoin, yeah. I mean, like, I don't know. To me, I just think it's, I don't know, Jack's probably a little bit accurate in that statement. I mean, like when, I don't know, but I mean, like it definitely is kind of a reserve currency for the internet already. And I mean, like it's something where, I mean, like this space is just beginning. It's going to keep growing.
Like, would we even know when that would there be a clear like demarcation, right? Would there be a point where we knew that it happened? Like what I'm saying is it could have happened 2 years ago. And as long as it was spread out well enough, we just don't know when that point will be when it happens too. I think is an interesting point to consider.
Yeah, it'll just be one day, like, oh, this is the state of things.
Well, it'll appear that way for sure, but it's definitely been like, yeah, it's been one of these things where it's like this slow turning machine that people are just hearing about in like the, in like the little side conversations they're having and about, oh, it's so speculative, like what is this and that and everything. But, I mean, like it is interesting just like like, I don't know anything about that movie other than like I heard that little spoiler about it and like hearing you talk about this Jack Dorsey story and like, a currency for like a bug bounty and like what's the bug that Bitcoin's trying to fix. And I think that it is a big problem to do with like the way that with the internet and all this information, it's hard to find valid information. And also there's like a problem there with financial freedom and sovereignty that it's also trying to fix as far as a bug in society. I don't know, it's just like I'm starting to think about it. It's just sort of spitballing that little thought.
Yeah, I don't know if I've mentioned it before in a previous show when we've talked about Jack Dorsey, but I think probably the reason, I don't know if he's getting in on it on behalf of Square or Twitter, but it would be really awesome if he had some kind of plan for using Lightning Network with Twitter, because I think Twitter really needs that kind of revenue model. I think they could use that in some fashion. But yeah, so this website I found the other day is called Bitcoin Per Person. And it basically, everyone knows there's going to be 21 or up to not quite at 21 million Bitcoins in existence. So if you own even one Bitcoin right now, there's only 21 million people who, like, let's assume everyone owned one Bitcoin. Obviously, you can own fractions of a Bitcoin. That's fine. You don't have to own a single Bitcoin. But it's only possible for 21 million people to have one Bitcoin. Obviously, it's going to be split up into fractions. Like, no one's just going to own one Bitcoin. But I thought this was like pretty interesting because it really shows you like there's 7.5 billion people in the world, and there's currently there's only 16 million Bitcoin, or almost 17 million Bitcoins. And the distribution from the block reward is going to get even smaller over the years. So if you own a Bitcoin right now, you're in a very advantageous position, because most people in the future will probably not ever have one Bitcoin. And that's I think because when people say they don't think it's likely that the price of a Bitcoin will go up, I mean, if they think it's even possible that Bitcoin would be used as some kind of global currency that anyone anywhere in the world would use, then it only makes sense that you can't have a world economy running on a currency that only has a market cap of $300 billion. It has to be like trillions of dollars large. So yeah, I think definitely, I don't know, I like Agnes said, I don't know if there's ever going to be a single point where Bitcoin just becomes like it achieves that world currency status as like a reserve currency. I mean, in some ways it has kind of been performing that way, but it's still extremely volatile. I would say the volatility would definitely have to go down, but that's not going to be for at least several more years. So yeah.
Yeah, and just like I would say I think you're pretty well off if you just own like a fraction of a Bitcoin at this point. Like, I mean, like, yeah, it's something where there's a limited supply, and it is one of those things where I don't know, it's like a lot of people, they don't want to get into it unless they know they own one or something, where it's like, just get yourself a fraction of it, you'll be all right.
Mm-hmm. All right, so you ready to poke fun at Mr. Dundee, Janine?
Yes, I'm ready. This is like, I have to say, this is probably one of the weirdest tweets I have seen him make, because it's completely wrong. There is cryptography in cryptocurrencies, especially
but no,
Bitcoin.
He says there's no cryptography in cryptocurrencies because there's just hashes and signatures. That's not cryptography.
Because if you wanted to go to university and study cryptography, you're never going to talk about hashes or digital signatures. And that whole thing about elliptic curve cryptography and Bitcoin, that's actually cryptography. It's like weird math or something.
Oh
It's the related technology, aka weird math, is elliptic curve algorithms or something. So yeah, this is pretty hilarious because this is, it's flat out wrong. Like, sorry, fake Satoshi. There is cryptography in Bitcoin. Hashes and digital signatures are cryptography. If he was trying, because some people, as we mentioned earlier, some people have said there is encryption involved with cryptocurrencies. That is only true to some extent with things like Monero and Zcash, because they actually try like confidential transactions, because they actually obscure some of the transaction information. But yeah, that's not the case. It's not that encryption is one type of operation that is possible with cryptography. Like, encryption does not equal cryptography. So to say that the entire field of cryptography is not something that is important to Bitcoin it's just wrong. Like, I really don't know how he came to this conclusion. Maybe cryptography works differently in Australia, which would be really strange because I mean,
the water does go down the drain the other direction, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, there's a bunch of other, actual smart cryptographers who have come out of Australia. So I don't think that's the issue.
The other thing isn't it just basically like also kind of a decentralized like PGP server? It like you can encrypt stuff using Bitcoin. This is so ridiculous.
Yeah, there's like public key cryptography in it, Craig. So yeah, maybe it's not a good idea that we're making fun of him. So I think, Shinobi, could you show some of the resources that could maybe help Craig understand where the cryptography is in Bitcoin? Because I think I linked to some.
Yeah, I
so
think
there's a course
for that.
Yeah, it's like a pretty famous course. I wonder if he's heard of it. Taught by, I don't know how to pronounce his name, Dan Bonnet.
Mm-hmm.
I think he's definitely a cryptographer, so he would probably know about this stuff. And I'm pretty sure in the syllabus it mentions, hash-linked databases and digital signatures and public key cryptography, all of which are things that are in Bitcoin. I also, I taught a course about cryptocurrencies, and one of the things I went over is cryptographic primitives, which is what hashes and digital signatures are. They're one of the cryptographic primitives. And so I think it's like slide 23. I think that was the first one in there. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Let me slide along. Ding.
Yeah. So basic definition of cryptocurrency. This one I didn't copy from anywhere. I just kind of combined it based on what I was going to talk about. And I think it's a pretty good definition for a cryptocurrency. And it's a digital currency that utilizes cryptographic technology such as hash functions, digital signatures, and public key infrastructure. All of them involve cryptography in some way. So
no, it's just math. Math is not cryptography, Janine. I think you're just confused. Satoshi has spoken.
Well, yeah. So if cryptography is like special math, then hash functions and digital signatures are like special math, apparently.
Oh Lord, this is just yeah.
It's complicated stuff. Very complicated.
Well, it's just comical because it's like this is the guy who's claiming to be Satoshi, and he's like got a good following of people that seem to agree with that sort of sentiment. And it's just like, off to the races with stupid there. I don't know. I mean, like, how is Bitcoin and cryptography related? I mean, they're just like, they're intricately linked. Like that's I don't know. To me, like, that's just where, this is like real life drama. If you still believe that guy is Satoshi, then maybe you need to participate in this market learning experience to lose your value, to actually understand that he's not. I don't know.
See, Janine, like she's got typos in here, like cryptographic primitive. It's math primitives, Janine. Like, come on. You're arguing with Satoshi.
I even show a command line operation. Ooh, scary. Very advanced.
I don't know if he'd have gotten one of these diplomas.
Well, man. The sad thing is I don't have any, so.
Well, that's where it's like, I don't know. It's like that whole world. It's like, yeah, I don't know.
Wait a minute. Wait, so you don't have a single diploma and you're arguing with Satoshi? He's got dozens.
Yeah,
dozens.
I know. When he rolled that wheelbarrow into that meetup, I was like, damn, I'm never going to beat that. I'll never know what cryptography is without all those diplomas.
All these certifications.
He even teaches and issues the diplomas at one point. He even did that. Like he is, you know.
And he's got a lot of patents too, I heard.
Oh, yeah. A lot of this freaking legacy crap matters, but yeah, I don't know. We're from a different part where it's just like, you know, what the work matters, right? We're in the proof of work. And like this is just like proof of stupid.
All right. I guess real quick, we got a Tether update, and then Janine will be breaking down a very shady thing that comes with the world getting more and more corporate. But for those who remember the original Tether report from Bitmex research, and real quick, I want everybody to stop right now, open Twitter in another window, and if you are not following the Bitmex research account, follow it.
Oh man, he's going full dictator again. Oh,
follow it. Like, I mean, like, you know, like here at the Digest, like we try to dig through information, present information in a way that's easily digestible for people. Like Bitmex research is probably one of the most succinct like people out there doing these things when they release something. So like, seriously,
yeah, there's some really good data on there.
Like if you want to know what is going on in this space, like don't just follow us, although you should keep doing that. Follow them too. But continuing, they were speculating about a bank in Puerto Rico being Tether's main bank account, pretty much. And they were kind of speculating based on the amounts of deposits and assets being held down there. And there was recently released a new report on all the activity from 2017. And if you look on this graph here, you can see that during Q3 and in the net for 2017, as there were huge increases in the amount of Tether printed, there was an explosion in the amount of money being deposited in these banks in Puerto Rico. And so after actually looking at all of this and the aggregate cash balance from the bank down there they're looking at, they're pretty positive at this point. And I have to agree with them looking at this, that this is likely Tether's main bank account. And I would say at this point, with a very high degree of certainty, I think we can say that Tether does have a bank, does have money in it, and the idea that they're just printing money out of thin air at this point is just, it's fucking ridiculous. All right. Ready for the Cambridge story, Janine?
Yes, I'm ready.
All righty. Let's get into the shady dystopian shit.
Well, I mean, we don't have to get too much in this one. I just thought it was kind of, because Cambridge Analytica is a big thing that's happened over the past couple of days, as you've probably noticed if you've been paying attention. But this article just stood out to me in particular because there's a particular comment that the journalist made about halfway through the article where he said that we don't know what hackers look like. Yeah, so because we never actually see hackers hacking, because you won't run into one at the water cooler, we can't really be said, that's kind of a weird sentence. We can't really be said to know what a hacker actually looks like. I don't know what kind of social circles he runs in, but how have you? I mean, he's probably somewhere in like his mid-30s, maybe 40s. How have you gone your entire life without, like, do you really think hackers don't work at standard companies? Do you not think they wear clothes? Like, he makes an issue about, apparently it's surprising to him that a hacker would dye their hair pink. I'm sorry, but that is kind of like dyed hair is kind of a hallmark of the hacker culture. Like, if you don't have dyed hair, you're like considered a normie. It's not and apparently neon shirts too. Neon shirts are like, oh my God, a hacker has never worn a neon shirt or leather jackets. It's pretty hilarious. But, you know, if any of you are in a similar state of ignorance to this journalist, and you have never seen a hacker hacking, you can go through the past 15, 20 years of the Chaos Communication Congress's some of them live recordings, others recorded and uploaded. You can watch there are literally live hacks that they do on camera, sometimes with their real names and their real employers listed in the description of their slide presentations. So if this like Schrodinger's hacker that you've conceived of, I can dispel that right now because they do exist. A lot of them dye their hair, and they particularly like neon. So, yeah. And also because there's often a thing that whenever a scandal happens, or something like that, apparently journalists have a tendency when it's a woman to talk about her appearance or how she dresses, or not even a scandal, any important woman. Apparently they have a tendency to talk about what they dress like or something. And so this example is kind of a counter argument to that, where, you know, his story is way more interesting than the clothes he chooses to wear. His clothes are definitely not at all interesting or unique about him. I think I read that he is apparently part of one of the I don't know if that was him. But a lot of the people who recently left Cambridge Analytica have gone into other companies that do the same kind of business. I think one of them is Emerdata. There was a few documents that I think there was like 2 female directors from Cambridge Analytica that they recently got confirmed as part of this Emerdata company. So and that was like about a week ago that they applied, and they've been confirmed in the last few days. So Cambridge Analytica, big story. I don't know why we decided to focus on someone's fashion, but this article, it was just kind of like a fake news funny thing that I thought would be interesting to share, because apparently there are people in the world who don't know what a hacker looks like and think they're some kind of obscure shadow person that may not exist.
See, like when you look at the context of like this article in like the wider story about how they've just been data mining everything and very calculatedly using that to kind of run PR for everything from politics to like non-governmental stuff in China. Like, I can't help but look at this story and see this as like an attempt to like plant that seed of fear. Like, you know, anybody who is technically competent, like let's associate them with all of this shady stuff, like these things that are gutturally just going to get a bad reaction out of people. And like just the way Cambridge is, like their whole business is just manipulating like people's perceptions like that. Like I cannot see like governments and big corporations out there not wanting to just kind of push this demonization of people who are technically competent out there.
Well, the video that they're
claiming, people who will speak, like those are the people who are going to let normal people know what is going on. And if you delegitimize them in the realm of public opinion, then people aren't going to listen to them.
Well, look, like their big claim to fame is that they manipulated the whole election. I mean, I think maybe they leaked this to get attention and draw people in. They did this on purpose to say, look how powerful we are with this data, you know? And this guy is another PR campaign on top of it. This is all back end manipulation stuff. That video that they claim like swayed the election only had 30 million views. I'm like, how many of them were just repeats or people sharing it who already saw it, etc.?
Yeah, and I actually sometime I think November 2016, around yeah, that was the time of the election. I tweeted out a paper about the how voter surveillance and commercial surveillance, which is what Facebook normally does. There was a really interesting line in a paper from 2013 where it said politicians shop for votes and increasingly find data on consumers increasingly valuable in that endeavor. Where voter surveillance begins and consumer surveillance ends is increasingly difficult to determine. So I thought that was particularly interesting because, I mean, is anyone really? I mean, people have been saying this for years that the ad networks are not just about advertising; they're also about surveillance. And why should we be surprised that the politicians are taking advantage of that? It's like, and by the way, this is not just because there is now a company with a name attached to this activity. If it happened, that doesn't mean that other politicians in the past are not using the same exact tactics. It just means that maybe for this particular instance, that was successful for one particular politician. But the Clinton campaign had like, if you know anything about the history of Clinton and Google, especially Eric Schmidt, there's a lot of emails between them showing that Google was like very much in favor of Clinton winning the election. So you had that happening. Apparently that failed. Obviously, basically any politician in the past, 10 so years has been using the same kinds of tools. Of course, they've advanced a lot more recently, but no politician is really exempt from this. They all engage in this thing because the ad networks are such a treasure trove from their perspective. Like a lot of data analytics companies see people's private data as treasure. This is one of the things I noticed, that they use all these words that are referencing jewelry or shiny rocks or something. It's like part of their language. And so a lot of them see this private data as a treasure trove. And if you're a politician, if you want to get votes, you have to first be able to know who you're speaking to and how to speak to them. And so you have to know their interests. And what's the best way to do that? It's to mine social media data for the same reason that a business would want to do it, to know which products to target ads, which products to put in ads and target with them. Can't make sentences. Target you with ads with products that you're interested
in. Mm-hmm. I mean, this is, to get into a little tangent before I pass it off to you for the next story, Janine. It's like we literally are, if we are not in the middle of it right now, a few years away from 1984 being a complete reality. Like all these internet companies are selectively policing communications more and more, skewed towards one specific narrative or ideology. Like when you look at things like, deep fakes out there, like somebody with an off-the-shelf GPU can do a more realistic looking rendering of Princess Leia than $1 million Disney budget on their desktop at home. Like the software is out there to fake people's voices. Like deep learning with graphic manipulation is getting to the point where we can literally in real time pull things out of videos. So you have a camera feeding something live, we'll just remove this person or this object, or we'll add something in. And like we're literally a blink away from just being completely unable to trust anything that we see, even live footage. And just like the way that is going to fundamentally change politics and like just how society organizes itself in general Like, that is just going to be a brick wall that we smash into before most people realize it's even happening. And like, that is just like, it's literally like an existential crisis put on or brought about by technology. Like, you know, in 5 years from now, how can you trust anything that you do not see in person yourself? Like, you won't
and we
be
know
able
it's going to
if you're
happen.
being a rational person.
And we know it's going to happen too. Like, we've already seen this type of stuff happen in Syria, for example. There were scenes of bombed out streets and buildings that were all photoshopped prior to the actual destruction of the city, which happened like months or years later, right?
But it's definitely like the lines are all blurry, and I'm just trying to imagine like what exactly, you know, GQ's getting at with their like you know, hackers dressed this way or that. And you know, in this whole area that we're in is like a lot of like what's important in this in these narratives is like these clearly defined lines. And I'm thinking maybe they're just like, yeah, trying to like clearly define like the cultural line of like, okay, this is what this group of people who have, you know, whether or not it's to encourage people to come that way or discourage, like, I think it's just to really define those lines. But it looks like Janine's got a good picture to show us where those lines are.
Yeah, there's this, you know, famous line that when you're on the internet, no one knows that you're a dog. Well, if you're a Doge, no one knows, no one necessarily knows you're a Doge. This is what hackers dress like, guys.
Hackers are inconspicuous.
Man.
Yeah,
This
because that's one of the things is like a lot of the movies that have hackers in them, you see them like wearing this like hoodie that's almost covering their face. And you look at that and like, that's not even, it doesn't make sense. It's not realistic anymore because that's not even, it's such an obvious, like if you're walking in bright daylight and you're wearing a hoodie and you're trying to cover your face, like it's pretty, it's like, it's not a very good disguise anymore, is it? So it's kind of like you're a dog walking around with a dog hood on.
That's right. Yeah. That's where it's like, I didn't really get, I mean, like, I never really thought about like every hacker's got their hair dyed, but then it's like, oh yeah, well, of course, because you don't want it to be the default, right?
Mm-hmm. So I guess if you're a dog, you know, just dress up like a dog. No one will know you're a dog.
Right.
All right. Ready to take us through this thing that is completely shocking, that nobody could have seen coming.
Yeah, I mean, so surprised. Never would have thought it would happen. So basically, the Intercept, which is one of the journalistic organizations that Snowden gave his cache of documents to in 2013, they've published a few more documents on Tuesday, and this time they're specifically relating to the NSA's interest in surveilling Bitcoin users through a Intercept program governed under Executive Order 12333 called Monkey Rocket. Which is supposedly, which was,
oh my god!
But that's not even the best part. It's so supposedly brought online in the summer of 2012, and it's a sub-program of another program called Oakstar, which is, quote, a collection of covert corporate partnerships enabling the agency to monitor communications, including by harvesting internet data as it traveled along fiber optic cables. And they specifically, in this case, they want to target network equipment in the Middle East, Europe, South America, and Asia. Remember those 4 regions because they'll come up again. Because interestingly enough, there is another program that when I read this article, I initially confused it with another program called Money Rocket, which you would think Money Rocket, much better name for something to do with, you know, tracking money or cryptocurrencies. And that program was included in the initial cache of documents that were released back in 2013. The purpose of Money Rocket, different program, was targeting counterterrorism in the Middle East, Europe, and Asia. Very similar countries, basically left off South America, but similar regions. And so the goal of Monkey Rocket, this program in this article, is to look at organized crime and cyber targets, great term there, that utilize online e-currency services to move and launder money in those regions. So considering that, you know, they both have very similar names and they're targeting very similar regions, and they kind of have a similar purpose of counterterrorism, money laundering, surveillance. I would not be surprised if they're related, although I haven't found any connection. It's possible that Money Rocket is another sub-program of Oakstar, the top program that Monkey Rocket is a part of. And the reason I think that is because even though the NSA and other intelligence agencies have said since the Snowden disclosures that the code names they give to programs they say they're randomly generated to hide the nature of the operation. But I don't think that that's a very convincing argument for a number of reasons, because as more and more Snowden documents have come out, we've seen more and more program names, and a lot of them are not actually that random. For example, there was White Tamale, which was a project where they hacked into the email system of the Mexican government. Obviously, tamales are, you know, native to that region.
So that's not Monkey Rocket because they were scared of me.
I think you're right, man.
Shinobi Monkey Rocket. Yeah, and there was also another one called Gilgamesh, which, if you know the story of Gilgamesh, that's very closely tied to what is now known as Iraq. And Gilgamesh as a program was using drones to target people in Iraq, Afghanistan, Yemen, Pakistan, and other countries in that area by tracking cell networks. There was also a program called Royal Concierge, which was run by GCHQ for surveilling the travel booking systems, specifically to track diplomats, the movement of diplomats. So clearly these code names, I mean, they're kind of random, but not really. Like Royal Concierge has to do with, you know, hotels and things. So that's clearly a connection. And then the NSA specifically has a bunch of programs that I think they were revealed in 2015, that they all end in the word Smurf. It's like this whole category of Smurf programs, and they're specifically about hacking cell phones, like turning on the microphone and the camera without you noticing. So even though the NSA claims that these names are random, they have a history of picking similar so-called random keywords for programs that are related to each other. So I think if they really did randomize these names, I think they need some more entropy in their random name generator because it doesn't seem like it's too random. So specifically back to this Bitcoin story, one of the documents from March 2013, they say that Bitcoin and Liberty Reserve are two of the top 3 virtual currencies that they were targeting, which is pretty interesting because this was March 2013, around the time that, you know, the stuff was happening with Ross Ulbricht. And so most of you probably assume, before I get into the Liberty Reserve connection, that because obviously they said 2 of 3 in that sentence. And so we don't actually know. I don't know if it was redacted, because The Intercept, unfortunately, has this very annoying policy of redacting documents, especially for something like this. Like, I don't know. I guess it must have been really sensitive, but they tend to redact very innocuous things. And it's kind of annoying because then when they write these articles, they kind of act like, well, we don't know what's in the redacted part. It's like, yes, you do. You just redacted it. Like, we know that you have this whole arrangement with the government that you tell them what you're going to publish, and they tell you what they don't want to have published, and you reach an agreement. Like, we all know this is happening. Don't pretend like you didn't see the full thing. Let's see. So most of you might probably assume that Monero is the 3rd currency, but that wouldn't make sense because Monero wasn't released until 2014. So it couldn't be the 3rd one. So I guess, you know, considering that we just saw that really cute Doge picture, maybe the 3rd one is Dogecoin. Never know. It could be the meme currency that ended up, you know, being instrumental in some kind of money laundering operation that drew the attention of the NSA. Never know. But one of the things that they state is that Monkey Rocket is being heavily relied upon for SIGDEV. SIGDEV stands for Signals Intelligence Development, or the acquisition of new intelligence sources via surveillance, which is different. If you're having a hard time conceptualizing what that is, it's different from human intelligence, HUMINT, which stands for the acquisition of intelligence through, direct personal contact with humans, like with interrogation. So signals intelligence is where you're monitoring signals, whereas human intelligence is where you're actually interacting with people directly.
I wonder if they're not doing this for economic reasons. Like, oh shit, we need to get our funding in order. Who are the best Bitcoin traders? We must find out. Like, if we can copy their trades, we, in just this much time, we'll have this much money. Guys, what do you think? We can use Oakstar. We can re-engineer it.
I wish it was that mundane.
I mean, to be honest, I think applying the NSA's capabilities to some of the big whales in Bitcoin would kind of be a waste of time, because some of them are a bit terrible at OPSEC. So I think it would be a bit overboard. Sorry guys, but you're just not quite up to scratch, a lot of you. But the part that really frustrates me about this is because the journalist, kind of hints at the fact that maybe the NSA was involved in de-anonymizing Ross Ulbricht and then prosecuting him and creating, if you're not familiar with parallel construction, is where you use illegal means to obtain evidence, but obviously because you use illegal means, that evidence is not admissible in court. So what you do is you use the evidence that you found to find other evidence in a legal way without referencing the illegally obtained evidence. So what frustrates me about the fact specifically that the Intercept redacted these documents is that, entirely possible that they could have referenced more relevant information in the rest of the document that could have, we don't know if there's evidence in this cache of them participating in the Ross Ulbricht trial. And that would be really important, because one of the big things that, the Ulbricht defense was saying is that they're not completely sure how the government even found him or gathered evidence about his activities in the first place. They have theories which tend to line up with the fact that illegal means of surveillance were used against him before he was arrested, and that's, that would kind of invalidate his sentencing, I think, if that was shown. So that's one of the things that really frustrates me about the Intercept is they used to say that their policy of publishing was that they would release documents if they were in the public interest, if they concerned specific individuals who might have been subjected to injustices. Those were the priority, and they would make sure those would get released as soon as possible. So if they've been sitting on this for, now it's been 5 years, almost 5 years, not only have they been sitting on it, but they've redacted a significant portion, and so we'll never know if it potentially holds any relevant information for Ross Ulbricht.
Yeah, they usually keep those sort of things out of the light on purpose, because it's, they don't want to be like, the Intercept's nice. I remember whenever it first came out and everything, and I was like, okay, we got this journalistic integrity, but, it's like, to get real journalistic integrity, you got to be locked down in an embassy somewhere 24/7. So it's like, they don't want to do that. And so they, I guess they play the game as well as they can. And I imagine whenever there is stuff like this, where it's like, they don't want to, get too much attention their direction, where they're going to have to be living in a, wherever that place is. What is that? What's that place that Julian Assange is at? It's
Ecuadorian embassy.
Yeah, in an embassy. Yeah, they don't want to hang out in an embassy 24/7 just to make sure that they get all the information out. It's I don't know. It's one of those things where, it's really hard to fight that fight, and so yeah.
Well, here's the best part. Apparently, Assange has accepted a invitation. I don't know how he got contact. Maybe it was an invitation. Maybe he sent in a comment. But apparently, he's going to he's going to speak to the UK Parliament about Cambridge Analytica's role in the election. Sometime, I don't know if they've set a date, but that's kind of weird. Like you're kind of like, it's a country that's holding someone under arbitrary detention, and they're okay with that person submitting evidence, like literally at a building that's maybe 20 minutes drive away from where he's being held, but he has to do it over video.
Oh Lord. Yeah, it's it's hard waters to navigate there. But you know, like I kind of like imagine, like, I don't know, whenever I was first getting into Bitcoin, like we're gonna get into this story in a minute about like you know, the Trezor, and like they had just gone for sale on Amazon, and I was like, oh, you know, forget that, because it's like, you know, these I mean, like, I don't know, back then it was like assumed, like, you know, these things are being monitored like by 3-letter agencies. Every convention you went to, it was like people were talking like, who's the CIA agent here, and like weird stuff like that. So I mean, like I don't know, I kind of figured, yeah, they were always here, but you know, I wish we could get some sort of information breakdown as far as like what exactly the monkey rocket and money rocket are trying to achieve. And like yeah, it's definitely one of those things where, I don't know, being in the military, it is kind of stupid, but it is like all those names, they kind of like, they do kind of still play on whatever the thing is. It's not usually, you know, irrelevant. Usually those names have some relevance towards their missions and everything. So I don't know, maybe they're coming after you, monkey. You might want to keep an eye out.
Yeah. They can try. But on that note, I guess let's slide into the news with these hardware wallets. So I'm gonna just give a quick TLDR of both of these. Both of these vulnerabilities were actually found by Salim Rashid. For those who aren't aware, he's Spudo We Are on Twitter, and he is actually only a 15-year-old kid. So I gotta say, he is one fucking smart kid to be poking around this deep in things, and I hope he continues doing that in the years to come, because people need, or not, we need people who are actually capable and motivated in this space. But pretty much regarding this this ledger vulnerability is mostly a result of the actual design of the chip. And so pretty much there is a main microcontroller unit which actually handles communicating with the buttons, the main computer, the display screen on the Trezor itself. And it's just kind of a normal run-of-the-mill MCU. And then the secure enclave, which actually manages the private keys, is like its own chip that's isolated and only communicates with the microcontroller unit. And pretty much how this exploit works is effectively the firmware for controlling everything is on the MCU. And the process the ledger has to actually do an integrity check on whatever the MCU is running is it pretty much just has the MCU spit out the firmware to the secure enclave, which validates that and then moves forward. And he actually found out, he dug really deep in this. And when you're dealing with something like C or a compiled language, pretty much it'll boil things down into the actual bare bone instructions the program is working out. And in the instance of the ledger here, there are some redundant duplications of some instructions here. And pretty much what he was able to do is modify the compiler to, instead of having these redundant instructions for each of the separate programs that are running on it, he effectively, I guess you could say, deleted the instructions in one of them and freed up some space for a code injection that would allow the MCU to pretty much pass off fake firmware or have fake firmware on it. I'm sorry. And then pass off legitimate firmware by simply referencing the one set of legitimate instructions to pass off code to the secure enclave and not actually make the enclave aware that there's malicious code on the MCU. And so in this way, you can kind of bypass the security check and do a whole bunch of things. You can make the word seed, if you're generating a new wallet, deterministic so that it's not really random. And when you generate it, the attacker would actually be able to get all of your private keys. You can modify what the display is showing so that you thinking you're validating a transaction successfully as you intended it could be tricked into signing a malicious transaction that's pushing it somewhere else. And pretty much, you know, from where I'm standing, this is kind of fucked. And yeah, the Ledger guys weren't. they responded so poorly to his pointing this out that he actually forewent the bug bounty so that he could actually publish all of this, because taking the bounty would have come with terms that he wouldn't be able to disclose all of this. So I have to say, like, kudos to him. He like, I mean, it's in his position as a 15-year-old. I'm not so sure that I would have done the same thing and turned down money, but
that's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, really.
And like, yeah.
Well, he's apparently made some money because he contracted with the Nem coin or whatever it is. He listed that on Twitter. I was like, oh, that's unfortunate, but he's definitely not someone that sounds like he's without money.
Mm-hmm. But I mean, you know, regardless of the situation, kudos. And I mean, like, this really goes to show that, you know, securing private keys isn't just a game or an easy thing to do. Like, this is serious business, and it's not the easiest thing in the world. So, be very careful where you get a private wallet from. And I mean, in the instance of a ledger, first, I would say everybody should not harass them on Twitter, but everybody should insist that they post much higher resolution pictures of the actual internal circuitry of the ledger, because they actually do not seal them when they ship them out for tamper-proof guarantees. And yeah, to really be confident that your ledger is secure, the only real way is actually pop the back off and inspect the actual hardware to make sure nothing has been tampered with. And then be very careful when it comes to managing the firmware on it. I mean, like, one of the things he points out in this is if an attacker were to have, say, waited for a legitimate firmware update and then start trying to spread malicious firmware, he could have gotten a lot of people to install firmware set up to bypass the secure enclave check. And yeah, that's definitely not a good thing. And I guess real quick before I stop ranting, the Trezor vulnerability is actually a lot simpler. Pretty much the chipset that it uses actually had a flaw in the chip itself. And when it comes to the bootloader actually starting up the wallet, there is a section of the memory that has like write protect flags for what should be accessible or not. And the device was actually looking in a different area of memory that is used to set what it should have been inspecting like as far as write protection. And the section of memory that it's actually checking is rewritable, because obviously that's pretty much where the instruction would be to write protect something. In the other section of memory would be modified. And so pretty much they pushed out an update to the firmware that would actually lock things down in the bootloader itself, and actually built in the permissions as far as what areas of memory it can and cannot access into the bootloader. so that they'd kind of nip the problem in the bud. But one thing I do want to point out here is anybody who has ordered a Trezor T, the new model, it's using a different chipset that is not vulnerable for this. So this is really only something that people with the older model of the Trezor should have to worry about. But yeah, I have to say this this definitely has me rethinking just pointing noobs towards a hardware wallet, because hey, it can be nice and solid, but if that supply chain is compromised, if they press a button they're not supposed to because they don't really understand the severity of the consequences of it, I mean, this kind of stuff can really bite them in the ass. And I mean, I do kind of want to take this second real quick to like say everybody should look at CoinKite's cold card and pretty much the chipset that they're using and the way they're architecting things, where they're actually baking in the integrity check of the firmware into the hardware itself in a write-only chip. So, like, I mean, I know a lot of people out there might not be the most technically competent people, but like you really should do your homework when you're choosing a hardware device to manage your private keys in the system.
I feel like
that's it.
I feel like in this era, in this time and age, in the info age, why isn't there an oscilloscope and a book you can go pull out and go through all the different microcontrollers, all the different resistors, all the different components that make up, because they're pretty standardized, right? And just, you know, put two probes on the board and scope it out and say the waveform should be this for that, you know, like, and so the companies can say, hey, here's how it should look, basically, you know, like that. There's what's the damage in that?
Well, I think that's where it's like the market. I don't know. I think, like, you know, Shinobi's saying, it's like the cold kite card and like the open dime has its open circuitry design where you could see all that sort of stuff and it would be easy to test those sort of things. I think, like, you know, eventually we're going to get there. It's going to take a long time. And like, you know, when I first heard this news, it was like, I was kind of like, oh man, like, you know, I have one of the old Trezor ones. And so maybe like, you know, what is this to me and everything? But you know, I'm really still pretty confident in mine. Just, you know, like, I mean, like I took the measures to sort of make sure I was ordering from Satoshi Labs and not through Amazon. And, you know, I'm, you know, inspected this package and like it was early enough to where I feel like that really is not something I need to worry about too much. But it is, I don't know, it's a good reminder. Like, yeah, it's very difficult to keep your private keys private. And it's one of these things where, you know, I've done these meetups and a couple of like talks to people that are really, really new getting in. And like you're saying, I'm real hesitant again to say this unless it's like, you know, get a hardware wallet, but also have like an air gap system that you're setting this thing up on when you're generating these seeds. Because like, you know, don't know as far as like the entire, you know, being secure. It's like, just try and make yourself as secure as possible. And hopefully through like this whole air gap system and, you know, using operating systems that aren't common and everything, like, I mean, you can avoid that sort of security flaws because
I really like the way the cold card is. Like, here's the labeled part, here's the part, and then the part also has the stamp of what it's called on there. It's like super, you know, you can follow the trace as well on the board. Like everything is presented so that the chips are readable, so that you can take it and scope it out and see what it does. You know, like that's what works in my mind. That's the way like electronics should be.
Yeah, and I mean, like, it's going to take news stories like this and possibly even people losing some Bitcoin from their hardware wallets in order for us for the market to, I guess, make the decision of like, this is what is important. And I mean, like we're saying though, I mean, just to run this down a little bit, as far as like with this Trezor, because this is the one that I focused on, as far as like protecting yourself, is like if you just update, if you have one of the old Trezor ones and you're worried about this, if you do update the firmware, then it should wipe out the vulnerability. Is that correct? I mean, like that's what they're suggesting on the website.
Yeah, with the as long as you update to the firmware with the Trezor, it's actually baking in the memory access permissions into the bootloader itself, so that as it's first booting up, it's already locked out of like the area of memory that it shouldn't be able to access.
Okay.
Yeah, make sure though, if you don't already know, when you do that, whenever you do any kind of update, you should always have your seed with you, because in case anything goes wrong, you need to be able to restore it. And so it's not a good idea to install a new version of software on your device if that could potentially have some kind of problem that, you know, destroys it, and then you can't access your keys because you don't have your seeds. So always have your seed with you. The only thing I would say about this is, first of all, I'm not surprised that he was kind of gave the cold shoulder to Ledger, because I've had a conversation with the CTO at Ledger. They seem to, like, specifically about Intel SGX, which this week there's going to be a talk at Black Hat about how cryptocurrencies, or the keys, can be taken out of Intel SGX, that it's not, you know, it's not a foolproof security model. Especially Intel SGX, because it's, you know, it's Intel. But if anyone, I don't think anyone should really be freaked out about this, because like the fact that, like, it's a good thing that Trezor and Ledger are doing frequent security updates like this, because most devices are not very good at that. They're automated, or, you know, there's benefits and cons to automatic updates, but most devices, like your laptop, do not have automatic updates for firmware. So like, you're way safer to use an isolated hardware device to keep your Bitcoin keys on, or cryptocurrency keys. It's way safer to do that than to store them on your laptop or your smartphone. Obviously, hardware wallets aren't perfect, but they're still way, way better than most people can manage with other types of devices. So,
yeah, very well said. Don't upgrade the firmware without the seed in the hand.
I mean, you know, it's with something like this, you have to take every improvement you can get. I mean, there really is nothing entirely perfect in the world, and I mean, it's like really the one thing I kind of take away from this is that, you know, businesses who sell hardware solutions like this, like, they're really going to have to rethink their supply chain logistics for the future going forward. I mean, because like this is it's manageable at the scale we're at now, but if you project out like 5, 10, 20 years from now, and you expect millions or billions of people to be owning and using Bitcoin, I mean, that is going to be a massive supply chain, a massive distribution network with a serious attack surface. And that is something that these companies selling hardware products like this really need to be proactively thinking about now. Because the bigger that these distribution networks get, the more products they're pushing, like, the more people who are going to be exposed to these kinds of attack surfaces. And I mean, yeah, I really hate to say this, but, you know, John McAfee made 2 predictions at I think the 2016 Miami Bitcoin conference, that Bitcoin's share of the crypto market cap would go down. Yeah, who cares? But that inevitably one day there is going to be a massive, you know, technological compromise of devices, and millions of people are going to lose their cryptocurrencies. And I mean, that is kind of inevitable. And so really all we can try and do in this community is just limit the potential scope of that as much as possible going forward, because one day it is going to happen.
Yeah, it's one of those things where you know, yeah, you can't always be 100% you know, secure, because then you're just going to be going through hell trying to stay secure. And
There we go. JW is back with 23%
He
battery.
won. He beat his computer.
What's that?
No, it's 23% of my hard drive rebuild left because I completely had to rebuild the OS. So sorry about that, guys, but I'm here. I made it before the show was over. That was my goal.
Wow.
Well, you missed us shitting all over Trezor and Ledger.
Oh no!
Oh no, you're there just in time.
Yeah, I really hate that they're not just using smart cards. I mean, that stuff has been around for a long time. I don't know why they feel like they have to reinvent the wheel on some of this stuff. I haven't given it a ton of thought though, so maybe it has to do with being able to get the backup seed or something like that. Maybe there's some good reasons for doing things a little bit unusual, but yeah, it is frustrating to see them struggling like that. And there's really nobody better to recommend at this point too. So I like what I've told people in the past is if you had like $10,000 in Bitcoin, use a hardware wallet to generate the seed and then transfer the money into those private keys, but then erase it, right? And just like flush it down the toilet. Don't use the hardware wallet and just have a paper backup. But some of these attacks really suck because you end up creating a seed that's already compromised. So it doesn't matter whether your keys are online or not, because the like the supply chain attack where they put new firmware on it just gives you a shitty seed that they already know, right? Like you can almost think of it as maybe a list of 5 seeds that they already have ready to go, and it just gives you one.
I think it'd be nice if they did some of these where they forced you to do something to generate some kind of entropy. Like to take this dice that comes with it, this die that comes with it, and roll it this many times and enter the answer into the screen or something.
Yeah, I mean, they could do that, but it wouldn't solve this particular problem because you could
Nope. Yep.
Yeah, you could think that it could pretend to be doing all of that and then give you 24 words that was just on a list, and you wouldn't know, and you would start generating seeds or keys based on that and just be screwed. So it's a tough problem. I don't really have a great recommendation other than maybe dig up those old docs of actually rolling dice, but that's a hell of a user experience.
Well, I mean, you can limit the amount of hardware available to like the actual code. It only fits on here. There's not enough space to do anything else. Like, sorry.
But see, that's what Ledger tried to do, and Salim was able to bypass it anyway. But I mean,
yeah, and I mean, they can also add more hardware, and you won't know. So it's really tough.
Really quick for the paranoid, like this, I think is one of the least thought of or realized uses for an open dime. Like the entire chipset is bare for you to inspect. Like you can check each individual piece of hardware. You actually provide a piece of the energy. And if you want to get really paranoid, you can take it, set it up on an offline air-gapped computer, and after you pop the seal, you can actually, there's a Python script embedded in the OpenDime where you can actually verify that the key was generated using the actual entropy you provided it. So if you want to really go full tinfoil hat, you can just get an OpenDime, get an air-gapped machine, generate a new key, verify that that key was actually generated using the entropy you provided, and then you can just take that address and send your coins to there, and then just keep the like unsealed open dime isolated from any computer, or even like back up the private key on a piece of paper too for redundancy. So it's a really good means to actually have a very good degree of certainty that the key you generate is secure.
I'll have to look at that. I mean, my initial gut reaction is, I don't know if you could really be that confident that your entropy was used, but yeah, I mean, it sounds plausible, but I'm not 100% sure it would work. But it's
you can get the hardware down to such a simple term that you know it's minimal amount of checks, and you're like, well, it can't possibly be doing much else. Like from the expert's point of view, you know, of course you would use a scope normally, but the actual chips themselves limits what you would actually have to check dramatically.
Yeah, hardware is definitely weird. No, it's unfortunate that at this point in time we don't have something as good as a smart card where you just know that the way that there's just no way to get the private keys off, that it's all hard coded, literally hard coded. So there isn't really anything to play with. We're definitely not at that phase yet, which is too bad.
But like, you really should look into the open dime though, JW. Like the whole thing is literally like an auditable Python script, nothing insane to dig through, and you can actually go through and like redo the entire like generation process and like prove that the entropy you provided was what actually generated the private key. I mean, it's really kind of ironic looking at like all these vulnerabilities with the ledger, the Trezor, that the little $10 credit stick is probably the most secure method for actually generating something out there.
Yeah, it's a mess.
Yeah, well, I mean, like, I think, yeah, like, you know, the open dime, the CoinKite card, the open circuitry, the, you know, it's just like, it's going to take time before like we actually get the securest hardware available for our Bitcoin. I mean, it's just like, you know, there's just so much incentive to not have secure hardware, to where like, you know, it's just going to take a while before we could actually get there.
All of that said, you should still use a hardware wallet. It doesn't mean that you go with a centralized exchange or pick anything else that's much more stupid. So the two options that seem reasonable to me at this point, if you're going to have a significant amount of money, say more than a couple $1,000, is one of those hardware wallets, knowing that there's risks. Buy it, you know, don't try to get it from the manufacturer. Don't buy it on freaking eBay. And then possibly, you know, we find those old docs where you can just roll dice and create an address from scratch. Although the downside of that is the privacy, because you're probably only going to create one key. But those are the two things that I think are probably in play. Do not use freaking Coinbase just because this stuff is hard.
Yeah, definitely.
All right. So drum roll. Oh shit, somebody's fucking DDoSing the Lightning Network. Who would have expected that? Somebody trying to fuck up the Lightning Network when it launches? What a shocker.
No, couldn't have thought of this. Couldn't have imagined it.
But so I pretty much just had like a real quick chat with an active beta tester. And pretty much what I think this is doing is just spamming very small value transactions really quickly to kind of overload the input-output operations and kind of fuck up the daemon by having way too many files open and being accessed at one time. But I mean, yeah, a problem, but I mean, that's what it's out in beta for, right? Find the problems. And I mean, this one really shouldn't be that much more difficult to deal with than kind of putting in place spam limits for things. I mean,
yeah, totally. This is normal. This is exactly why you build software and you iterate on it and you release it in beta form. And a DDoS is like this sort of the least interesting of all security attacks, right? Like if you had to make a list of 1 to 10 or something, you know, elevation of privilege, remote elevation of privilege, like I can take control of your machine remotely without any of your interaction. That would be like number one. A distributed denial of service is like at the very least interesting, right? It does the least damage. It requires the most effort from an attacker. And you can do that to just about anything, right? Like if you put enough resources behind it, you could DDoS anything, because you just DDoS normally in most circumstances is just throwing out requests, right? And most software is designed to respond, at least initially, to pretty much any request. So it's not, you know, it's definitely nothing to freak out about. It's nothing that I think any of us are surprised that is happening. It's just part of the development process, and it's not even like, it's not tragic in any way, right? It's not like the off by one errors in Bcache or any of that bull crap, or the parity the parity multi-sig. It's not like that. It doesn't indicate a design flaw. It's just a normal part of the development process, the normal cat and mouse with with attackers. So I'm glad it's happening now. You want it to happen in beta so that you can get that free testing and fix the bugs and be a little bit harder. But in 9 months, like, it's going to go down. In 2 years, it's going to go down, right? Like, this is just normally how software development works. It doesn't mean that it's going to be a big deal, but there's probably going to be new attacks found and new patches pushed, just like every other piece of software. I think we're kind of spoiled because Bitcoin is so weird. Like, it's unusual that a network was built and has basically had zero downtime since it was created, even though it's a very high security application. So if for some reason you can't buy your coffee in 3.5 years for 2 hours because there's a new DOS attack that we didn't think about and we have to like wait for everybody to deploy a patch, that'll be not a big deal.
Yeah, and considering how hyperbolic some of the statements have been from people like Fake Satoshi and Roger and all those people, considering how like they've made some extreme claims about how insecure Lightning Network is, and so if this is the best attack they can do, that's pretty sad.
Yeah, exactly. Nobody's losing funds.
Yeah, no, this is just like, I think in that tweet it said something about deploying in adversarial conditions. It's just, yeah, it's a part of open source development in the Bitcoin space. You launch this thing and you know there's people that are, you know, gonna try and take you down, but that's part of the development process. It's why it's in beta and it's still being, you know, developed before it's like ready for market. So I think yeah, better now, and it's definitely not something unexpected.
And I mean, also, like, another thing to look at is, like, the bigger the network gets and the more distributed things are, I mean, the less effect things like this are going to have. You know what I mean? It's kind of like, you know, just the internet in general. Like, part of the reason that DDoSs are such a big problem right now is because the things that matter to DDoS are so concentrated. Like, once you start breaking those up and distributing them, like, the more they're distributed, the less a denial of service is going to really affect anything as a whole.
Yeah, that's totally true. I mean, if you have 10 times more nodes to attack, that's 10 times more traffic you have to push. And a lot of times it's even more because the network will become more and more resilient to ignoring nonsense the bigger it gets. So, yeah, that's a really good point.
All right. Any more lightning FUD, or we want to move into the third to last story?
Oh, let's keep moving here.
Bitfury struggles to maintain some kind of relevance. But they're announcing a new expansion into Norway. And I think it's really funny that they're playing up the creation of new jobs in this. They're projecting a total of 30 new jobs. We're creating 30 jobs, people.
Well, it's Norway, you know, they don't have quite the population we have, right?
I will never brag about creating problems. And I will never brag about creating problems that are so like impossible to solve that I need people full-time working on them all the time for probably the rest of their lives. Like, that's not the thing to brag about with technology.
But it's like pretty much they're giving their shtick about enterprise blockchain solutions. And yeah, I think this is going to just wind up being a mining facility that creates a whopping 30 or so jobs, and they're going to try to sell Norway on their nonsensical blockchain solutions built on things like Emmercoin. I mean, you know, I think it would be a win in a practical, actual sense to maybe get Norway attempting to transition towards a land registry system like they are in Georgia. But I mean, aside from that, like, it's this. I mean, I used to really like this company. I used to like really think this had potential to give Bitmain a run for its money, but like they've just kind of taken a spin around the toilet. I mean, they haven't been able to keep up in terms of hash rate manufacturing. You know, in hindsight, I think they just went way too early into trying to limit their production to like large customers instead of dealing with the retail market. And like I really think it just shows when you see like the analytics platforms they're developing and trying to sell to law enforcement now, like the fact that they're pushing all these things like title registry systems as software as a service, like all of the I mean, like that Emmercoin nonsense. I mean, Jesus Christ. I just remember that graph where they had this nonsensical flow chart pretty much thinking they're going to replace all the core infrastructure protocols for the internet. And it's like they're scrambling to find ways to generate money because mining pretty much just kicked their ass. And like I really think that's their only shot of being a company for much longer, you know, just kind of looking at it from the sidelines.
Yeah, it also doesn't help that they were so willing to participate in the surveillance of Bitcoin.
Yeah, that's part of
You
that.
know, yeah, you know how that part of the NSA article that said that they're making the whole point of the program was to build corporate partnerships for the surveillance of Bitcoin? Yeah. Do not be surprised.
It's also like, don't be surprised when you get left behind in the cutthroat competition of ASIC development and like, you know, staying competitive on that mining field. Like you start focusing on that, next thing you know, you got Dragon Mint miners coming at your tail.
Yeah, I think that's probably the pattern, right? As you see a business that's just struggling to find any way to diversify or to change direction, to have a line of business that they can actually defend, because the one that they're in right now is totally the most indefensible, right? Like the lowest barrier to entry, the least ability to create like a differentiator. Brand name doesn't matter. It's just, can you crank out hashes, baby? And that is a rough business to be in. So I think we're going to see more and more of these guys just struggle really hard to understand how competitive of a space that they've moved into, and not try to find ways to get back to, you know, old school business where you can build up a brand name and then you know, maybe do a couple dirty deals with the right regulators and have a nice big fat piece of cheese coming in every month. They're not living in that world anymore. So I think it's gonna be some pain for them to recognize that. And the guys that are the greasiest, I think, are the ones that tend to go greasy the soonest, and that's all good because it's not going to work, and they're just going to be out of the way even faster.
Yeah, get out of here, Bitfury, Bitmain.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's yeah. I really hope that they start getting a lot of customers for a land registry system before somebody develops an open protocol for that, because most of the other shit I see them working on, it's that or chain analytics. And you know, if we go the direction I hope we go, I don't think chain analytics is going to be a profitable business for more than the next few years.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. I mean, mining is a really tough business to consider, even that it has the possibility of profit. Like if you were the only miner, you would destroy your own profits by pushing up the difficulty. That's rough, man.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. You know, I don't want to get into that too deep, or I'm going to start ranting and not stop for the next 10 minutes.
Yeah, I'm going to get us into a big conversation. So, yeah.
What are you talking about? We're only in it like hour 2. Somehow I have all this energy. I don't feel like I've been talking that long.
Well,
hour
I mean,
3, 3.5, something. I don't know.
See, this is kind of why I think that, like, you know, when you look at like covert ASIC boost and the suspicions that Bitmain was using that, you always, and it's kind of true that you always hear the argument that the profit increase is really marginal. Like, you know, you always see people throwing out huge numbers, but when you really break things down in reality, it's more just like having a little edge that everybody else doesn't. And like the whole reason I was like so against covert ASIC boost and found it to be such a problem is just like how it distorted the incentives for things. I mean, like it would incentivize small blocks, but that's really only a part of it, because having that extra margin, like I do think that the more we see production of ASICs be distributed, we'll see this everywhere. And I do think that Bitmain does have a lot of hash power that they just keep offline for exactly that reason, that they have costs. And the more hash rate even they put online, they're increasing their costs. And it doesn't really make sense to do that unless you think you can capture more of the pie. Like it's kind of like that game of chicken, you know what I mean? And with that extra edge of covert ASIC boost, like they could push that farther than other people. Like that, they effectively would have like a throttle where they can just kind of crank the hash power up and down to fuck with other miners' margins. And because of covert ASIC boost, they can push it a little harder than somebody else could.
Yeah, I totally don't think that's very conspiracy theory. I mean, it's a business where like steel production, I don't know, the margin is like 1.5% or something. Like if you spend $1 million and you make 1.5% on that, that's pretty good for steel production. Freaking mining is brutal. Like if the Bitcoin price isn't skyrocketing, you're going to wish you could have 1.5% profit margin. So if these guys were able to use covert ASIC boost and get 30%, it's not 30%. It's 3,000 times, right? Or what was it? 3,000? I think it's 3,000 times more profitable if your margin was 1%. It's crazy how important that would be. But yeah, if that's over now, that's great. You know, they had their run. They were able to, you know, almost destroy the network and the free world over it. But fortunately, we survived it. And now the only smart thing for them to do, if they have a bunch of hardware that's sitting in a room that they can fire up when they want to, is get that stuff on the market and sell it, because the window of opportunity for them to be able to sell their mining hardware is closing. So it's time to play honest, and that's why a lot of us really wanted SegWit to fix that problem. So good news all around. I don't know why Bitcoin's not at $1 million.
Mm-hmm. But like, you know, it's like shit. My brain just farted. Like that entire dynamic of the Monero miners. Like when we saw that news break, like that, it is crystal clear obvious that those were being used to actually mine in private, that they literally designed, fabbed, and were just using these miners that nobody else knew about. Now, if you look at that in just an obscure, or relatively obscure cryptocurrency like Monero, like why would you not expect that exact same behavior in Bitcoin? I mean, like that's literally something that's been stated over and over and over again since ASICs were first developed. Why wouldn't you just build them and mine yourself if you're the guy building them? Like you make more money doing that, unless you think Bitcoin is going to fail in the long term, than reselling them. That's what they do. They build them, they mine them, and then they sell them later to recoup some of the costs.
Well, I mean, if that's the right play when you are the only ASIC manufacturer, and you can do that play for a period of time and be very profitable. But the problem is that all those profits, all that blood in the water is attracting other sharks, and you're not going to be able to keep all of that secret, right? There's too many employees inside the company that know that you are printing money on the ground, and that information moves out of the organization. Even if you're the freaking Yakuza and you're cutting off heads if somebody opens their mouth, you're still not going to be able to keep that a secret. And what that does is it draws in competition, because they're going, wow, there's a lot of money being made here. So That's the beauty of the market. Like you can come up with something new and creative and innovative that solves a problem for humanity, and you can get paid for that for a period of time. But you better enjoy it while it lasts, because it's not going to last forever. And that's the situation that they're in now. I mean, the Dragon Mint miners, whatever. I know that there's stuff coming because I know there's profits. I don't have to. It's like I know 2 + 2 = 4. If there's profitability there, competition is on the way.
Up the orders on the last 2 stories real quick, just because that was a nice setup for that. But there is I will say, like, this, when I saw this headline, I was kind of like, because probabilistically you always have lucky runs and so on, and bad luck in mining. But Bits Online, Wilma Wu posted this article where she noticed, at least in the short term, a big drop in BTC.com and Bitmain's hash rate, and an increase in slush. And obviously, everybody should know by now, they've updated their Stratum implementation to support overt ASIC boost, and Dragon Mint miners should be like starting to ship out in waves now. So she's kind of speculating that, we're starting to see some of these Dragon Mint miners actually come online now. And I kind of just wanted to point this out on this block trail pool distribution. This is the maximum time they'll go back in history. And you can see slush at like 4%. And then we go up to the yearly, the 6 months, the 1 month, and then the 1 week and 24 hours. You can see they've kind of, like, over the last, week, month, kind of started stepping up that, like, share of the hash rate. And I mean, I'm not going to say because we see a big flux for like a day, like that's definitive proof. Like, we actually have to let this kind of average out over longer time periods. But I do think that is kind of a good thing to keep an eye on, now that this kind of came across my eye.
Yeah, I mean, it looks hopeful. I kind of feel like this the way I feel about price movements, right? Like, I know Bitcoin's really valuable. I know it's going to be really a high price at some point in the future. I don't know what the heck is going to happen between here and there. So it could slop around, and if it went to 1,000 tomorrow, I wouldn't be completely shocked. Although I'd finally be able to buy a lower instead of the all-time high. Damn it! Yeah. But with this, like the mining centralization thing, I don't know exactly what's going to happen in the near term, but I know that it's getting more and more obvious that it's a profitable business to produce those ASICs, and it does seem like there's more and more entrants into that space. And that's going to result in more decentralized mining, because there's going to be, we're closer and closer to a commoditization of that ASIC hardware. So for me, that's the key. Like, everything else is secondary. The mining pools are, I definitely don't want to see one huge big mining pool. I definitely don't want to see, massive miners. But really, it all comes down to ASIC manufacturing. That's the bottleneck in this whole thing. And once you can go out to Amazon.com and buy an ASIC miner that's basically cutting edge, just like you can buy a USB stick that's basically cutting edge, without having to think about it or stress about it, and it does actually show up, that's going to be a whole different ballgame.
Yeah, and I just was paying attention to what you were saying on Andy Hoffman's show earlier today. You mentioned the price cuts through language, like that, like it breaks that translation, and like I think that's where it's like, yeah, it's this game is just like it's all price and math and engineering, and anybody can get involved in it, and it doesn't really have a barrier as far as the language goes. It's really just like do you have the will, and you want to get involved in it and you go at it. I mean, hey, anybody can play that game, and I think that's just like it's an interesting way to see it, where it's like the price, it cuts through any language barrier in defining. I'm trying to put to words what exactly you said there. I'm trying to remember.
I was I was talking about how like the way that we're always trying to find a narrative for the price, and it's always after the fact. And I never really believe necessarily that the price moved because of X, Y, and Z. Because the one thing that you can't hide in a market economy is the price. So if you're like, you know, some crooked government, you know, official, you could make an announcement or buy, but what you can keep secret is what you're doing, but the market price is going to reflect that. So let's say that I'm going to make a big announcement about something positive in a week. The only way I can profit from that is to buy now, but I can't hide the fact that the price is going to, I can't prevent the price from going up a little bit when I take that stuff off the market, right? So it's inevitable that price is always going to communicate very clearly how much demand there is for something right now. Even if the narrative is like delayed or maybe even never comes out. So,
yeah. I mean, like, we were talking about that a little bit earlier with like, people trying to pull stories to, you know, explain what the market is doing and everything. But it's all a technical. I mean, like, I feel like there's technical aspects to it where it's like, you know, they're just going to reach for what they can. But I mean, I don't know how exactly the mining hardline fell on this, other than like this is just like, it's just numbers game. I mean, the mining is. I mean, anybody could participate and step up and, you know, try and find an efficiency and figure all that out. But I don't know. I'm trying to figure out how exactly I related that to that.
I think you were thinking about the brilliance of investors, which is a good segue to our next story. Just how damn smart these people are that are in Silicon Valley.
So smart that we have $12 million CryptoKitties.
My brain explodes like. I mean, dude, like,
it's so stupid. Nobody would believe this, man. If we made up this story, and it's not like it's just any random person, right? This is like Mark Andreessen's company, like the dude responsible for the most popular internet browser, one of the biggest IPOs back in, I don't know, like 95 or something, who's created one of the most successful venture capital funds in the history of Silicon Valley. Like he couldn't be more well respected, and this jackass just invested in CryptoKitties.
And dude, Union Square, the other investor, literally said CryptoKitties is the world's first and most successful consumer blockchain product. Have they not seen the remittances businesses, the business-to-business payments take off, the thriving multi-million-dollar darknet markets that Bitcoin has created? Like, what the hell are these people smoking in this world?
How about the $150 billion savings problem, right? Like the store of value, that's not an application now. $150 billion, that's just play money. But CryptoKitties, that's where shit's at.
This is where it's like obvious, like they don't even know what we're doing here. They just like, this is the best use case for these CryptoKitties. Oh my goodness.
Yeah. And like, dude, their chief executive officer, Mark Flavel, literally in commenting about CryptoKitties says, we really do believe that decentralization is going to have a dramatic and powerful impact on the human experience, and that CryptoKitties is an arguably wildly successful attempt at that. I mean, like how deluded are these people sitting on piles of cash to just throw at nonsense? I mean, like, Jesus Christ.
Yeah, I don't know. CryptoKitties was one of those things where when it was taken off, it was like one of those things where it's like, oh shit, like now Ethereum's gonna have to hard fork because like all this stuff is taking up space on the chain. It's like, I mean, like it wasn't, I don't know. It's one of those things still where it's like, I mean, as far as a judgment call of whether this is good or bad for Ethereum or any of that, it's like, but hey, they got $12 million because they got the eyes on them, I guess. You know, it's if the eyes are on them and they're in the blockchain space, you get $12 million, sir.
Yeah, like, and like, dude, it's like, they even say, like, it's like because the internet loves cats. like
it's so dumb. It's so dumb. I mean, if it wasn't all dumb enough, like the ultimate layer of additional dumb irony here is that CryptoKitties is not even secured with Ethereum. Like it's not a smart contract that operates on Ethereum and follows rules of immutable rules. Like code doesn't decide when there's breeding and when there's not, or who owns what
right?
kitty. All of this is so many layers of bullshit. And when you actually peel it down at a technical layer, there is a freaking SQL database sitting somewhere with database entries of dumbass pictures of cats and user IDs. Like that's it.
Yeah, because apparently it surprises people to learn that the pictures of the cats are not actually in the blockchain anywhere. It's literally just code that they basically their website transforms whatever code has been included in the contract into these pictures of the cats. Like the pictures of the cats are not even in the blockchain.
Yeah, they're not even randomized either, right? It's like because I think that cat artist just got famous, really.
Yeah, he was at the Blockstack event, and one of the things they said it was kind of a joke, and it was like, oh, this is probably because the thing is, when you buy these cats, you don't own the art. It's all copyrighted by the company who made CryptoKitties, so you can't even make T-shirts of the cats that you buy. Like that's a copyright violation. And they said during the conference, the artist wasn't actually there, which is kind of stupid. I feel like you should have the artist on the stage talking about this because, you know,
is there another word that we can use for this guy? Because if you call him an artist again, I'm just going to freaking lose it.
Cartoonist.
Wait a minute, it's like
cartoonist.
Okay, fair enough. Good. Thank you. All right, I can live with that.
Yeah, I mean, I think because there's another application that came out after this one where it does dogs, and I have to admit the dogs are way cuter than these cats, and they actually look somewhat realistic. But yeah, anyway, one of the comments they made at Blockstack, that Blockstack event where they had, I think it was like the CEO and another person, and one of the things they said was, oh, this is the first artist to make millions of dollars off their art. It's like, first of all, I don't think that's true. I mean, I'm pretty sure there's plenty of artists who have, I mean, most of them make the money after they're dead, but I'm pretty sure there's some live artists who have made money from their art.
Come on, Banksy.
Yeah, I think there might be a couple musicians out there or something that have made money off of art. I don't know. Like maybe the Beatles, they probably made a couple bucks to scratch together before they died. Good grief. The level of like insanity here is just, it's so much. But I think the most important takeaway from all of this bullshit is just to understand the gravity and the massive amount of dumb money that's sloshing around. Because Andreessen Horowitz is like, they're as good as it gets in Silicon Valley, right? Like we have all of this respect for venture capital firms, and we think that they're all brilliant because they created the last Facebook or whatever. You don't have to know very much. Just know that you do know that CryptoKitties are the stupidest thing you've ever heard of, and that one of the best VCs in Silicon Valley just invested in it. And now you know that it's all bullshit. Like the only reason that these VCs have money, in spite of the fact that they are more often than not wrong, in spite of the fact that they're barely better than random chance, is that suckers like you put money into a 401k and that trickles its way around into the hands of this jackass, Mark Andreessen, who invests in CryptoKitties. Now that you've seen that thing full circle and you have plenty of expertise to know what's going on, you know how stupid everything else is. And, that's why Bitcoin isn't at $10 million right now, but it will be someday.
I mean,
hopefully it'll defund all that bullshit too.
I mean, I like, honestly, if they wanted to invest some of their money in it, whatever, but $12 million seems like that's, by the way, these are the Tron dogs that kind of were, I don't think it's actually been released yet, but just from the art, I'm not saying buy this. I mean, I still think it's just as weird as CryptoKitties. It's not actually storing anything in the blockchain, guys. It's not that, right. If they actually try to store the images in the blockchain, they'd clog up the Ethereum network even more than it already got clogged up, and they didn't even store pictures. Like that's pretty sad.
I am rebranding myself as that dog.
That actually is. I'm not a fan of pugs. I'm not a fan of any dog that can't breathe. So,
Oh,
But you know what? I bet you whatever he's thinking right now, it's more intelligent than I think I want to invest $12 million in CryptoKitties. He might be thinking about licking himself or trying to get a hold of bacon, but it's not as stupid as I'm going to invest $12 million in CryptoKitties.
Yeah. I mean, for them, like, I don't care. Invest in it. $12 million is extreme. But for them to come out to like major news publications and say it's like the first and best application of blockchain technology, that's ridiculous.
that sounds like something an investor would say. I'm kind of curious as to like if he's an investor in this thing. I mean, like I'm just thinking, you're giving somebody $12 million for their CryptoKitty project. You're certainly going to dig into it a little bit, and I'm wondering. I mean, like certainly he's got to see like this is like going to be a fork in the roadmap where CryptoKitties are going to be its own like thing. I mean, like I don't know.
No,
I think you're right. It's just like these people are just stupid.
Pain, man. Just sit in that pain and just feel that pain. The world doesn't make any sense. These guys are really that stupid. Just reconcile yourself to that. You're not going to be able to find your way out of this.
No, it's so funny because you're like, how do you know? I'm like, are they really that stupid? No. Yeah, I don't think they're that stupid.
You find a way out of this existential threat to your understanding of the universe, and I will be shocked.
Look, guys, the point of investing money is not necessarily to invest in meaningful things that make sense. It's to invest in things that will get a return on an investment. And I don't know, it seems like at least in the short term, doing this kind of thing where you're not actually storing pictures in the blockchain, but pretending you are and calling them decentralized and censorship resistant when it's all basically just a copyright scheme. Right. It's like, yeah, sure, they're going to make money off of it. So I don't know if it's from a financial standpoint, it's not really dumb, but from a perspective, like they're trying to convince people that this is meaningful or worthwhile, or that this makes sense in terms of what the purpose of a blockchain is and what its potential is, that it doesn't make sense at all. And I want to point out that one of the other investors was Naval Ravikant. I think that's how you pronounce his name. And he's one of these people that I always see on Twitter. He's like quoted and stuff as being one of the big Bitcoin thought leaders. I think he's even on that list, that influencer list we were looking at a while ago. I think he was one of the top accounts in terms of influence. And I don't know, I've always like, I like reading, intelligent things by intelligent people, but I'm always extremely nervous of like participating in this kind of like thought leadership game. Because then you have stuff happen like this, where he invests in CryptoKitties and which has made all of these claims that turn out to not be really true and kind of a waste of time, but it still makes money. And yeah.
It won't make money. These VCs will never see their money back, but they don't care because they rarely see their money back on investments. And some of that is that this is just high risk stuff. But a lot of it is just incompetence because they don't even recognize or kind of acknowledge the reality of how rarely they make a good call, right? And they did not make a good call here. CryptoKitties, I mean, I may have to end up sticking I may have to stick my face through a plate glass window or something if I end up wrong on this. But CryptoKitties will not IPO and they will not get their freaking money back, because that's when early stage investors get returns if they're a VC firm. They don't typically get any returns until there's an IPO moment. And God willing, if there's anything reasonable about the universe, CryptoKitties will not IPO.
Oh,
yeah. Because to be honest, like the best time to invest in this thing was before it went crazy and the CryptoKitties suddenly became worth $100,000 overnight. Like you kind of missed the boat a bit for like the major skyrocket jump. I think that fervor might start dying down when people realize it's not really what it says it is. Especially like, I think this is like so far, especially at this early stage, the only value I can see coming out of things like this is if it actually educates people at a really basic level how to interact with Bitcoin and what Bitcoin is and how it works. or I guess because it's on Ethereum, I guess how Ethereum works. I haven't seen really any emphasis. Like I've seen some from the actual CryptoKitties company about how they want to use it for educational purposes. But in all of this recent promotion last day or so about all of these big venture capitalists investing in it, I have not seen any emphasis on education. So I don't know, like, because that's why I wasn't too hard on it initially, because I thought, okay, if they're going to use it for education, that's fine. I mean, I wouldn't put millions of dollars in it, but that's a good thing to do for people. But they're not, I don't feel like they're focusing on education anymore. So I think they kind of lost their main value add with that.
Yeah, I think that that whole idea of like, I don't know, digital scarcity and like applying it towards a piece of artwork, and then like you know, the idea of like digital scarcity in itself is kind of speculative, but then it's like, oh, well, then you could have some rare piece of artwork on this digital scarce piece of thing. And so there's like, I don't know, I guess, yeah, there's lots of speculation there. The education aspect is just like, you know, there's never really any money in education. It doesn't feel like that. I mean, it feels like education is kind of something where, I don't know, we're moving forward in that to where it's like people are starting to self-educate, and, you know, that education, you research yourself, you're going to get a lot better education. I don't, a little bit of guidance there than what you would get going through legacy systems with the public schools and stuff like that. So, but yeah, like CryptoKitties, this is about as ridiculous as it gets. I mean, like, I don't know, yeah, crypto dogs, Dogcoin, Dogecoin. I mean, we're gonna see more of it. It's just like eventually, will it ever be this thing that it's trying to be? Well, yeah, rare Pepe. You know, yeah, like Theo came in here with the rare Pepe in the bag with the open dime. I mean, like, you know, I mean, like, it's going places. It's just not CryptoKitties.
Yeah, I mean, if my guess is that Andreessen thinks that they just invested in a company that has a proven secure platform for creating digitally scarce collectibles, right? And they probably think that, you know, CryptoKitties isn't the end, because I really can't see a VC thinking that just kitties is going to the moon. But they probably think, you know, we're going to do all kinds of different collectibles, right? All kinds of different digital art on this platform. But what they don't realize is that that platform is a freaking MySQL database, you know, in somebody's garage right now. It is not the freaking blockchain. And even if it was the blockchain, it should have been the only blockchain that actually offers any security in the first place, not Ethereum. So it's like 17 layers of stupid, and then it's a database of cats and user IDs.
So
hashes or whatever.
Yeah, and so here's the best part. So the thing that's most frustrating to me about this whole thing is they didn't even try to make the algorithm to generate the CryptoKitties be smart. Literally all of the CryptoKitties are, they're not, when I say handmade, I mean like they're literally made by the artist. Like he made them all, and he probably, maybe he employed some kind of automated process with Photoshop to like make copies with very simple variations between them. But they're all basically made by him, and the algorithm is not open source, so you don't even know what kind of CryptoKitty you're getting when you breed them. Like you can't even play around with that. And they've even said like they're going to come out with like new versions and new colors or shapes or stuff or augmentations, and it's like you don't know what it's going to look like because none of that code is open source. And I feel like it would have been way more interesting if they had actually made this automated, that when you breed them, there's some kind of like algorithm that actually generates the pictures. The funny thing is, at the Blockstack conference, they actually asked, or the CEO actually asked the audience, would you still think CryptoKitties were worth as much as they are right now if you knew that they were generated by a computer? And a bunch of people raised their hands. And he was like, oh, well, I would hope that you would care about their originality and the fact that they were handmade by a specific artist. And it's like,
no, because the only reason people are buying into this is that they think they're buying into something that represents like what you just described, right? Like a living piece of code, or a piece of code that's independent and functioning. They don't think that they're buying something that some jackass just drew a picture of and threw it in a database. Like there's nothing special about that. Like the specialness is supposed to be that these things are sort of, you know, their own living sort of organism that exists,
This is
right,
why
on the
it's such a
blockchain,
good,
and is secure.
investment, I guess. It's like you could sell it for so many things. It's like, oh well, it's like, it's this or it's that or it's the other thing. Like, I mean, it's right now it's a couple of different things, and you could sell a speculative value for all those.
We may have had some hand in encouraging that along in some way.
I don't think
I mean, we brought it up on the show, didn't we? I thought.
Guys, I just had a horrifying dystopian nightmare pop into my head with
Is it related?
virtual 3D projectors and your crypto kitty replacing your real kitty, and all of it being verified ownership wise through the blockchain with lockdown projectors that won't project crypto kitties that you don't own.
Nah, my cat is off chain. Thank you.
Yeah, dude, my cat. I'm like, where's he at?
Well, if CryptoKitties is any indication, you don't have to worry about that because it's not going to be like a functional piece of code. It's just going to be some jackass in a corner drawing 3D pictures and putting them in a database, and a bunch of people not knowing the difference. So, how dystopian could that be?
Yeah,
Very.
It was. It's not.
It's
not cool.
He's just a struggling up and coming artist, trying to sell his, authentic original artwork.
Yeah. I don't even know. I don't know. Original concepts, then repetitive, redundant artwork.
Also,
sorry, go ahead, Janine.
So, full disclosure, I'm also still bitter that they stole the name for the show that I was going to do, which was literally CryptoKitties.
Yeah, that's right. I remember that was the end of last season.
Yeah, which I announced like on a different YouTube channel like a whole year in advance of this thing. So, yeah, thanks, guys. You stole my name. I still might take it back from you, and there's nothing you can do about it.
Reclaim that thing.
I'll put a space between crypto and kitties like I was originally planning to do, and then you can't sue me for trademark.
CryptoKitties. Something where like you're the emphasis of you're the or something,
The other takeaway lesson here is that diversification is a really, really stupid idea, because if you have invested in a mutual fund that's invested in something that's put some percentage of its money in this company's hands, you currently own a stake in CryptoKitties, right? If you have some retirement fund, you are probably, maybe it's a small amount, but one way or another, I bet your sorry ass is an investor in CryptoKitties right now. And if that makes you feel stupid, it should. And you should know that you should become an expert in what you invested, not trust, this goofy system where the best of the best in Silicon Valley invests in CryptoKitties.
Yeah, I like how that article that we included to describe the investment, it also mentions at one point that none of these people are directly invested in Ethereum. They're just invested in other funds that are invested in Ethereum. It's like, oh, okay. So you're like 2 steps removed, but not, or 1 step removed, but not, you still have a stake.
Yeah, it's one of those things where, I don't know. I get into discussions and it's obvious that I guess there's some stake in there, and pretty interestingly enough, it's a lot of those people with these 401ks that are investing in it without even knowing it,
which is pretty amazing that you can literally invest in a project that supposedly puts digital cats on the Ethereum blockchain, and yet you're not invested in Ethereum. Like,
right,
you kind of are, aren't you?
Yeah, and you're probably not invested in Bitcoin because I'm not aware of any funds. I'm not aware of any VC funds that are really invested in Bitcoin. I don't think that's happened much yet. We don't have our coveted ETFs, so the average jackass with all of his money in a 401k could be invested in it. But you sorry bastards, you've got your CryptoKitties. So keep enjoying, following the mainstream, keep doing what they tell you when you go down to Edward Jones Investments and ask them for advice, and enjoy your CryptoKitties, or stop it. Cash out your 401k and start making smart decisions on your own. Become an expert before you put your money somewhere.
Yeah. And so, I just want to, because I don't know if I mentioned this on a show yet, but at the one of the things that they asked Edward Snowden at the Blockstack conference was, I think Peter Van Valkenburg at one point asked him, "Do you have any CryptoKitties? Do you know what CryptoKitties is?" And you like, I think they might have a video recording of his talk already up. I haven't checked, but you should seriously just the look on Edward Snowden's face when he got asked that question. He was like, "Oh my God, why are they asking me this?" He kind of like sighed. He sighed and he was like, "Yeah." and then
oh Lord,
and then at the end of the talk they offered to, he's like, can you send me an Ethereum address so I can send you a CryptoKitty? And he like laughed and logged off.
This is not the revolution that Edward Snowden was hoping for.
Right. He's like, oh man, this is what I was getting myself into, was what is CryptoKitty? Oh man. Yeah. It's yeah, we're going mainstream here with cryptos.
I don't like it.
Don't worry, we got all these like big scary stories with your hardware wallets to keep the pace of adoption at least moderate.
I don't like that either.
Well, then get ready because we're moving.
Learning is pain.
Just wait until there are digital assets consisting of pictures of people. That's going to be a roller coaster.
Oh my goodness! Yeah,
I have my virtual wife now, and we're going to make virtual babies. It's perfect.
I think that like luckily
my horrifying thought went more horrifying than that.
Oh man.
Well, right into VR games, like interacting with another, like, copy clones of personality profiles that you sell and then get turned into crypto humans online.
Holy shit, scam! Damn.
Well,
no. Bitcoin is cleaning all this stuff out. The average morality of the typical human has got to be improved after we get rid of central banking. So I'm optimistic on that front. We have to go through the CryptoKitties. The CryptoKitties are a cleansing moment for these freaks.
Well, I just want to point out the line of thinking that I was going for was that Shinobi misspelled CryptoKitties a little ways up in the internal chat. He spelled it CryptoKitties with a D.
No.
And slanders.
Like you know that someone's gonna do that, and Ethereum is gonna like have to deal with that situation.
Oh man.
Yep.
Oh man.
The memes.
We just need a nice Jim Bell inspired legal system. Or Murray Rothbard. I'll settle for Murray Rothbard inspired legal system to take care of that crap. So we're headed in the right direction.
Well, to be fair, I think Murray Rothbard was one of those guys who said he would be okay with selling children in the market. So I don't know if that's an improvement.
No, he did not.
I am pretty sure.
Damn
I
it.
think.
How many months have I been doing this? And Murray Rothbard's a Nazi selling babies? What the fuck? Read a book, damn it.
I'm not saying he's a Nazi. I'm just saying that's one of his more controversial views, that he thinks there should be a market for unwanted children.
Well, I think
a market for gosh. All right, it's too late. It's been 3 hours for you guys, so I'm going to let that one slide.
All right. Give me the last thoughts to load up. Come on.
All right.
I have thoughts.
Yeah, like man.
I have a quote from Mark Zuckerberg. Okay, so does anyone? I mean, being German, I already know this, but does anyone know what Zuckerberg's name translates to in German?
Zuckerberg.
Big? No, I mean Zuckerberg. I mean Berg is like Berg's so common. I don't know.
City, right? Berg.
Okay, so Zucker is mountain, or no, sorry, Zucker is sugar. Berg is mountain. So his name in German is Sugar Mountain.
That's worse than Sugar Daddy.
Oh God, that's good.
We had Crypto Daddy, Leather Daddy, and now we have Sugar Mountain. What the heck?
That's been my nickname for him has been Mr. Sugar Mountain, and no one gets that joke except for my German friends.
Oh, that's dark.
All right, I got it. Yeah, Zuckerberg. Sure.
Yeah, so this in case you're listening on audio, not looking at the video, this is a quote that's kind of famous from Zuckerberg talking to a friend of his, like I think 2010. Yeah, so it was in the early days of Facebook, and the friend is asking him. First of all, Zuckerberg says, "Yeah, if you need any info about anyone at Harvard, I have like 4,000 emails, pictures, addresses, and stuff." And the friend says, "How did you manage to get all that information?" And Zuckerberg says, "People just submitted it. I don't know why. They, quote, trust me, dumb fucks." And it's like, yeah, for anyone looking at...
Could it possibly be more true than it is today?
Yeah. It's like if anyone wants to know what the...
human.
If anyone wants to know what the ethical ethos of Facebook was, well, maybe it's improved since then, but it started off in a pretty dark place.
I think dumb fucks just submitted it should be actually their tagline. It should be Facebook. Dumb fucks just submitted it.
I think that everybody should use this new offline meet space social network called MyFace. You go where other people are and you talk to them.
Like directly? Ugh.
Yeah, that'd be weird.
I was trying to find a.
That's...
I'm sorry. Y'all go ahead. I'm trying to go into another thought. I'm sorry.
I just don't see how that goes viral.
Cheddar on the spot, load of thought.
If you guys ever want to see my face, it's only going to be in person. So I haven't thought anyone's like.
Y'all all got to get over here to Colorado at one point in time. Y'all are all going to have to come by this meetup at some point.
We cannot centralize, though. We're going to have to take turns. You know, we got to play the decentralization to the maximal.
All right. Well, I'll just say, like, I think Memorial Day is about the nicest time of year around here. So y'all can fight for that one.
All right. Here's her other thought. It's silly. It's really silly. It's a bunch of lambs in a donkey pouch with Uber rideshare.
It's just so cute.
Yeah.
All right.
Mother Nature. All right. So I don't have a link for my final thought, but my final thought was like, hey, it's spring, right? It's the second day of spring, right? And it's feeling good outside. Like I'm thinking, get out there and do something. And like, I don't know. I was just like also thinking like, man, it's been like a year since UASF, man. And it's like, man, we really should probably have like some sort of like, I don't know, some sort of UASF like holiday day or something. I was thinking about that. I was wondering, I don't know. I was just looking at the repository and, from Shallon Fry. And I know like it looks like the first post was March 20th, which is yesterday. I don't know. I'm still trying to figure out the days and like when there would be a proper time to celebrate and all that sort of stuff.
I've got it, Rick. From March 20th to August 1st, it's UASF party time. It's an excuse to drink. It's an excuse to be lewd. It's an excuse to just not give a shit.
You heard that? And we're 1 day into that. We're just 1 day into it. 9 more days of debauchery.
Hey, you got to be inclusive for the non-alcoholics in the room.
Okay. I'm sorry. Get with it, Janine. That's how society works.
All the sugary drinks your mind can imagine this week, because we're a year out from UASF. I mean, like I was just thinking this morning about like it's like hard to believe that it's like a year and like what all has happened in that year. And just like, man, it's like we're back to spring and it's been an intense year. It's been awesome. And let's just keep moving forward. It's awesome. So second day of spring, year UASF anniversary. Let's go out and celebrate, people.
All right, JW, thoughts loaded. Go.
All right. Final thought is, if you want to understand Bitcoin, and the political philosophy and the economics behind it, read For a New Liberty. It's not a hard read, and you will make me not have to smack my face against the wall quite as often as I do right now. Seriously, this is really important to the future of Bitcoin, and also just the future of the world that we end up creating. We need to understand enough about how the free market works to where we can put solutions together around law and police forces when all these existing things are defunded. So it's not good enough just to tear down. We need to be ready to create new solutions, and Bitcoin is doing both. But it's really important that we're prepared for it. So check it out, and you won't think that Murray Rothbard wants to sell babies.
All right,
Yeah.
tactics. Load of thought.
Yeah, springtime's coming for some people, but I'm about to get stuck with another nor'easter over here. Oh my God. So it looks like I can, do some celebrations while hunkering down and taking advantage of some more hibernatory type activities.
Yeah, you have to do some spring skiing or something, man. I don't know. Like, it's one of those things where, we're gonna have to adjust with wherever we're at. Just get out there and do some springs, something to where you feel like some spring in your step. So maybe it's not you're feeling the spring temperature, but you're feeling the spring in your step.
All right. My last thought is
This is just related to the talk of seasonal weather. I just want to remind everyone that in some parts of the world, like, the southern hemisphere, that it is actually getting colder because their seasons are different.
Yeah, but those third world countries.
You can still have a spring in your step with some cold weather.
Like in Australia, it is currently fall, I think.
Well, they've been installing these super huge General Electric turbines that are literally as tall as the Golden Gate Bridge in blade span. And they're putting them, one after the other. I mean, what's the effect of something like that on the jet stream? That is a lot of energy.
All right,
I don't think we need to worry about the Australians. I don't think they even have the internet.
Their water goes down the drain the other direction. I mean, come on.
JW, I think I need to remind you that one of the most prolific frauds is an Australian in the Bitcoin community.
That would make sense because they don't have the internet down there, so they don't know that Dan Kaminsky debunked him, and they can't read his blog. That makes perfect sense.
They also don't know what cryptography is, apparently.
Why would they need to? They don't even have the internet. They're just like trading eggs for sheep down on the corner. They're fine.
Oh goodness, no, man.
Man, Austria is going to get pissed off just because
I apologize to any Australian viewers because seriously,
then New Zealand is like the backwoods of Australia. So the latest fake Satoshi, he is totally not a threat to anybody.
That's hip though.
Well, if anyone wants to read about the role that Australians played in the cypherpunk movement, they should check out Underground, written by Dreyfus and Assange, because that's an important book. Read it. It's available online for free.
Assange is not Australian. He has no more Australian in him than he has dark hair or blonde hair.
He's New Zealand, right?
No, he's an Australian, dude.
He's Australian.
I'm just yeah, and he's blonde too, right?
All right, I think
I'm just being a total pain.
We're just trying to hold up the.
Are you saying Australians can't be blonde?
In all honesty, for the last 5 minutes, I've been just trying to enjoy knowing that Brian really needs to pee and wondering how long I can.
I was wondering if that was what AK was talking about, stream and flesh and all that.
Goodbye, everybody. All true Bitcoiners will join me in drinking nonstop until August 1st.
Do we have to? Oh man.
Hey, everybody.